Part 62. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 642. Is that so? Caoge flattened the back of the chair, then rolled up the sleeve of his native arm and lay down. Logo stood on one side of the chair and said, "It's best to have something to fix the arms and body. The process may be a bit painful." "It's okay." Caoge shook his head. "I'm confident that my tolerance for pain is quite strong. You can start directly." "Okay, but you must not make any large movements, as this may cause more serious trauma." Logo nodded. Upon hearing the trauma, the surrounding guards immediately took 2 steps closer with nervous expressions on their faces, but Caoge waved his other hand to signal them to move away. "If this girl wants to harm herself, I'm afraid no one here can stop her, so what's the use of you coming closer?" Caoge said to himself. "It's about to begin," Logo said softly. Yes, Caoge subconsciously bit his back teeth. If he said he wasn't nervous, he would definitely be lying. Logo stretched out the index finger of his right hand. This finger was very slender but not skinny. The skin on the surface was soft and white, and the nail cap at the front was smooth and shiny. It was like a flawless piece of art. Taste. Kaylan subconsciously thought of a metaphor that often appeared in many novels: green jade fingers, and Logo's fingers really looked like they were carved from warm jade, but that's it. Green jade fingers, the nails with not sharp tips pierced through Caoge's skin without any hindrance. Under her fingers, Caoge's muscular arm was like a piece of soft tofu, which could be pierced with just one poke. Caoge's eyebrows twitched twice. For him, this level of pain was not enough to make him scream. On the contrary, the medical soldier on the side was stunned. He stood there for half a second before he reacted and said, This hasn't been disinfected yet." Logo didn't speak, but Caoge turned his head and glared back at the medical soldier. But the next second, his facial expression became violently distorted, as if he was suffering from great pain. Caoge's legs began to twitch and kick involuntarily. Kaylan could see that he seemed to be trying his best to suppress his body reaction. His mechanical prosthetic hand had even pinched the metal chair armrest. A crumpled piece of scrap metal. "Can't we give him anesthesia first and then start?" Kaylan muttered. Just when he was considering whether to knock Caoge unconscious and use physical anesthesia to reduce his pain, Logo, the finger has been pulled out. Caoge's whole body trembled violently at first, and then he collapsed on the chair without any strength. "Sew up the wound," Logo said to the medical soldier who was on standby at any time. The latter quickly stepped forward, took out a few sterilized cotton balls with tweezers, and wiped the wound on Caoge's arm. "There is no need for disinfection or debridement, just suture it directly," Logo added. "I have already treated the wound and it will not be infected." "But this doesn't comply with the procedure." Before the medical soldier could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Caoge's feeble voice. "Do as she said." But even if there is any problem, you are not responsible," Caoge added, and the medical soldier reluctantly put down the tweezers in his hand and took out the needle and thread to suture the wound. The wound on Caoge's arm was not big, only 2 centimeters deep. After only 3 stitches, the medical soldier cut the thread and applied a white patch to the wound. The whole process took less than 5 minutes. After doing all this, the medical soldier was stunned for a while before he started to pack up his things. In the process of suturing the wound just now, he violated at least a dozen operating rules. If this was a clinical skills test, I'm afraid he will never get the qualification certificate in this life. "Is this good?" Kaylan glanced at Caoge, who was breathing heavily, then looked at Logo, and asked. "Okay." Logo nodded and stretched out the finger he pulled out from Caoge's arm. Kaylan noticed that on her fingertips, there was a soybean-sized, dark green liquid droplet that was shaking slightly. "Is this the toxin remaining in Caoge's body?" Ze Luo nodded again, took the cup that Caoge had just used to drink medicine, and poured the liquid in. Suddenly, a burning sound of shishi came from the bottom of the cup, and a stream of white smoke rose from the cup, and a fishy smell suddenly filled the cabin. Kaylan looked into the cup and saw that a small hole had been etched into the bottom of the cup. If Ze Luo hadn't stretched out his hand to catch the drop of liquid, it would have fallen on the floor. Kaylan even felt that this thing might be able to erode the entire battleship. This toxin has mutated many times in his body. Although the biological agents he took previously can suppress this toxin, it will also prompt this toxin to continuously optimize itself. At this rate of development, if he removes the toxin, he can live for up to 1 year, Ze Luo said to Kaylan. How do you feel? Kaylan glanced at Caoge, who had already recovered. He sat up and moved his native arm that was wrapped in a bandage a few times in some incredible ways. There is an indescribable sense of relief. It feels like I am in a dream. No, even in the dream, the pain has never let me go. But now, those painful memories are like a dream. As Caoge spoke, he couldn't help but look at Ze Luo, who was still expressionless, his eyes full of gratitude. As for the previous fear of Ze Luo, it has disappeared without a trace. Thank you very much. Although his steps were a little frivolous, he still stood up with force and bowed to Ze Luo sincerely. If you have any requests, within the scope of my personal authority, I will give them all. It's satisfying. Kaylan glanced at Ze Luo. She saved the person, so naturally he shouldn't interfere with her choice, but if this girl made some excessive demands, it would be very troublesome. After all, Ze Luo has only been exposed to human society for a short time, and even Kaylan doesn't know what her inner moral concepts and code of conduct are. What if this girl said she wanted to dismantle Caoge and see what the body looked like after being corroded by this toxin? There is a high probability that Caoge wouldn't reject her, right? I want to visit this battleship, can I? This request made by Ze Luo would definitely be considered a serious violation of fleet regulations in normal times, and could even be dragged out as a spy and shot, but now, Kaylan and Caoge both breathed a sigh of relief when they heard that her request was just to visit the battleship. Yao-class aircraft carrier battleship, with a total length of 1,650 meters, is equipped with 3 high-power energy shield generators. Its main power source is 4 ultra-large crystal energy converters. In addition, there are 2. The nuclear reactor serves as a backup power source. The weapon is equipped with 2 plasma main cannons, 4 200mm caliber cluster laser cannons and 256 quadruple close-range defense cannons, as well as 6 sets of Wanderer missile interceptors. The system and the capacity of more than 200 carrier-based aircraft, officially entered service in the 935th year of the new era, and it is the warship with the strongest overall combat effectiveness in the human fleet. Ze Luo said in a familiar manner, but Caoge was not too surprised. After all, these parameters are public and can be found by searching on the internet. Many military fans and netizens are not familiar with the weapon configuration of the Yao-class aircraft carrier battleship. It is also very clear. Although it is a bit strange that a girl would be interested in this thing, it is still within the understandable range. However, Ze Luo's next words made Caoge's eyes widen. The first time I operated a Yao-class aircraft carrier battleship, I relied on the firepower of a single ship to level 4 military bases in succession. Wait a minute, have you ever piloted this kind of battleship? Caoge felt that his jaw was about to drop to the ground. The Yao-class aircraft carrier battleship was removed as the prototype ship de Yao without an army. In addition, a total of 2 ships have been built. The first Kirin has crashed in the Leviathan incident, and the second is the current flagship of the first cruise fleet Suzaku. More than half of Caoge's military career was served on the Kylin and Suzaku. Naturally, he was well aware of the movements of these 2 warships. He had no memory of what these 2 warships had attacked. Military base. Could it be that she was talking about the Yao that was not commissioned? That's even more wrong. The Emperor Yao is actually not a complete battleship at all. To be precise, this is actually a 1-to-1 scale battleship model, which was built to verify various technical problems in the development process of the Yao-class aircraft carrier battleship. Not to mention weapons, the Emperor Yao doesn't even have a power source installed. This thing can't even fly out of the dock, so how can it attack a military base on the ground? Moreover, at the end of the research and development stage, the Yao was dismantled, and most of its parts were directly installed on the Kylin under construction. From a certain perspective, the Kylin Hao is actually the Emperor Yao Hao. How could she possibly have operated a Yao-class aircraft carrier battleship? Kaylan was stunned for a moment at first, but he soon came to his senses and asked tentatively, "Is it, in a game?" Yes. Ze Luo rubbed his index finger and thumb lightly, and the drop of fatal liquid disappeared in an instant. It is a self-made mod by a player in Red Alert 9. The combat units in it are all current. The current equipment in service ranges from 0-1 assault rifles to Yao-class aircraft carrier battleships. The Yao-class aircraft carrier battleships are epic-level units of the Shenzhou force. They have very demanding construction conditions and massive resource requirements. Generally, it's very difficult to create a situation in the game, but once it's created, the outcome is no longer in suspense. So that's it? Caoge wiped the sweat from his forehead. Well, it just so happens that the First Fleet is heading to the anchorage of Yagunakter, and I will take you to visit this battleship on the way. Mr. Kaylan, if you are interested, you can also go together. I'm not very interested in battleships. Kaylan waved his hand, and he thought to himself, it's a good thing that Leighton is not here, otherwise, if this machine guy saw that he gave up this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity so casually, he would have to find him. Trying your best doesn't work. Kaylan has more important things to do than visiting the battleship. He first called Pan and asked the crew to pardon Chi Hanfan, who was serving his sentence, and reinstate him in the military. Then he initiated a video conference with everyone who stayed behind in Yagunakter and told them what happened here. Stop the exploration of Block 1 for now and concentrate all our manpower. Kaylan said, the battle for the ancient Bronze City ruins will be fierce, but it shouldn't last too long. Of course it won't last long. With the defense facilities of Alpha Civilized City, it won't take half a day to kill all these hundreds of thousands of people. The Hound said angrily, I just can't figure it out, even that what kind of bastard prophet can understand the language of the Alpha civilization, but it will take at least several years to completely control a ruins. Are the departments responsible for monitoring the entire planet really useless? Captain K, with all due respect, Ghost Owl said with a stern face, the Greybird hunting group is not a mercenary. Our lease contract with the family did not mention this type of business, therefore, for the next combat operations, we will not participate. My men and I will remain at the forward supply base in Yagunakter until the next exploration operation begins. I know that Kaylan nodded to him. The Greybird hunting group does not have any obligation to participate in this battle, and I will not force you to join. Thank you for your understanding. No matter how much money I pay, I can't let my people die. Ghost Owl stared at Kaylan through the screen, with a complicated look on his face. We are all senior relic hunters. You should also be able to imagine what an Alpha civilization city with its defense facilities fully activated looks like, especially a city rated as an A-level ruin. I know, Kaylan responded. To be honest, I also led a team to explore this ancient Bronze City ruins in the early years. At that time, there were no traces of heretical sects in this ruins, or in other words, not many people had explored it at that time. This ruins, Ghost Owl continued. Are you one of the members of the original land reclamation team of the ancient Bronze City ruins? Ian's eyes lit up, and he even used the honorific in his words, although the activated city is very different from the previously unactivated ruins. But the experience of a pioneer hunter like this is still extremely precious information. The land reclamation team doesn't count, but when we took over that mission, the exploration rate of the entire ruins was only 20%. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 643. More than 100 urban ruins have been discovered on Alpha Planet, but most of them are C and D level ruins. There are very few urban ruins that can be rated as B. You know why the ancient Copper City ruins are a super ruins, Ghost Owl said slowly with a calm face. Why? Yan on the screen in the lower right corner asked innocently. Yes, family is different from the Grey Bird hunting group. As a noble family that has cooperated with the military for a long time, from the moment this war was finalized, they were already tied to the chariot. Because it's not a city at all, but a fortress, Ghost Owl said word by word. Every word he spoke was like a powerful drum beating on the hearts of everyone participating in the video conference. Fortress, Yan couldn't help but exclaimed. 1. An alpha civilization fortress controlled by a heretical sect, how can it be defeated? Although I have heard some news related to the ruins of the ancient Bronze City, this is the first time I heard about the fortress, Kaylan said. Since Mr. Ghost Owl, you have been to that place, please tell me about it in detail. That exploration experience. That's right, Yan quickly agreed. The Ya Group is willing to pay you a generous reward in exchange for information on the ruins of the ancient Copper City. The layout of the buildings in that ruins is very different from other alpha cities, Ghost Owl said. I wonder if you have heard of something called formation in ancient China. Formation. Does it mean the formation of the army in ancient marching and fighting? Hound couldn't help but ask. That is also a type of formation, but I am referring to the application of formation in architecture, Ghost Owl said. Architecture, are you talking about something similar to the Bagua array? Kaylan asked. What Bagua array? Isn't the Tai Chi Bagua pattern the pattern on the South Korea flag in the old era? Yan suddenly asked a question that left people speechless. Ghost Owl. Young master, you are so embarrassed. Fortunately, you are still a descendant of the Huaxia clan. How come you don't even know the Tai Chi gossip of your ancestors? Hound suppressed a smile and complained. What the hell? Is Tai Chi and Bagua originally something from our Chinese culture? These guys are so good at stealing, aren't they? They steal everything, even the national pattern of a country. Are they all stolen from our Chinese culture? Yan suddenly blushed. As a dandy young man who is proficient in eating, drinking, and having fun, he is really not very interested in these things like the ancient culture of the old era. After all, talking about food and art when flirting with girls, even talking about luxury goods, can achieve the purpose of showing off. But if you go to talk to a girl about these difficult and obscure things from thousands of years ago, I'm afraid the girl will walk away without interest before you finish talking. The Bagua array I'm talking about comes from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, also called the Eight Arrays. Zhuge-Liang, the Prime Minister of the Shu Kingdom, once set up such a maze of boulders with huge rocks at a place called Yufupu to stop Lu Xun of the Wu Kingdom. Tens of thousands of pursuing troops, Kaylan explained. So exaggerated? How many stones can stop an army of tens of thousands of people? Even if it is a maze, the maze can be filled with just the number of people, Yan said in astonishment. Of course the novel contains a certain amount of exaggeration, but similar formations actually exist. In fact, the maze that is very common in the ruins of the Alpha civilization can be regarded as the concrete form of the formation product, Kaylan continued. The ancient Copper City ruins itself is a huge maze. Ghost Owl nodded and took over the words. This is a maze specially set up for military purposes. According to the capacity of the city ruins, let alone tens of thousands of soldiers and horses, even if 1 million people were thrown in, they would be trapped and die. You all probably know where the name Ancient Copper City Ruins came from, right? Ghost Owl asked. I know, I just went to check the information. Yan scratched his fleshy double chin with some embarrassment and said, it's because the buildings in the city are all made of a kind of copper element as the main component. It was built of alloy, That's why it's called the Bronze City. Then have you ever thought about why the buildings in the Bronze City use this alloy, instead of the lower cost earthstone concrete or polymer? Ghost Owl asked again. Maybe, for the Alpha people, the cost of copper alloy is lower, Yan asked with some uncertainty. No, although I don't know the correct answer, your statement is definitely wrong. Layton shook his head repeatedly. Although the copper reserves on Alpha are not barren, they cannot be said to be rich. For a person who has occupied for the civilization of the entire planet, this reserve is barely enough. The value of important metal resources like copper is definitely higher than concrete and plastics that can be synthesized by chemical means. Then why do they use copper alloy to build the city? Yan asked confused. Because copper is an excellent conductor, Ghost Owl said. The entire city, or the entire fortress, is actually a super large weapon. Every building in the ruins can be turned into a deadly weapon. Arms. What do you mean? Does it mean that every floor in the city can be electrified, electrocuting everyone who enters? Hound raised his eyebrows. Then rather than saying this is a fortress, I am more inclined to say this thing is an oversized torture instrument. If it were just high-voltage electricity, my hunters wouldn't have sacrificed by then. Ghost Owl sighed. The entire city is not only a conductor, it's even a giant energy shield generator. A city-scale energy shield generator, Layton exclaimed. Then, how terrible is the energy consumption? If it is fired not as a shield but as a weapon, it should be able to hit the ark with one shot. Will you wear it? When we explored the ruins of the ancient Bronze City, the defense facilities of this fortress had not yet been activated, but even such a dormant fortress still claimed the lives of 9 elite hunters from the Grey Bird hunting group. Ghost Owl sighed again. Well, I'll post the video of the original exploration. After watching it, you should understand how dangerous this ruin is. After a short progress bar, the camera on the Ghost Owl's side switched to a slightly blurry video. This video seems to have been shot with a portable video recording device mounted on a helmet. From the time in the upper right corner, we can know that the shooting time was in New Era 941, which is exactly 10 years ago. The position of the video shooter is the center defender, located in the middle of the entire team. In front of him are 4 avant-garde wearing lightweight powered exoskeletons, and about 30 meters in front of the avant-garde is a lone scout. The position of scout is the most dangerous in the entire hunter team. Generally speaking, hunters who serve as scouts are either consumables who are sent out to mine mines, or they are bold and careful. Old Bird, and this scout of the Grey Bird hunting group obviously belongs to the latter. This is a female hunter with a petite figure. She wears a highly elastic combat uniform that is very close to her body. The combat uniform completely outlines her body lines. She is very thin, the kind of skinny person. The chest is even and almost indistinguishable from that of a man, but for the scout, those 2 piles of fat are unnecessary burdens, and it is this lean figure that is the best. The smaller the body, the more places it can get into, and at the same time, the smaller the area that will be affected by various mechanisms. This scout's code name is Hummingbird. She is a veteran. Although she is only 19 years old, she already has 6 years of experience in exploring ruins. The Ghost Owl's voice sounded outside the screen. She has 6 years of exploration experience at the age of 19? Didn't she start to be a hunter at the age of 13? I remember that the hunter qualification certificate can only be taken when you are an adult, right? Yan muttered. It is illegal to use child labor. With 6 years of exploration experience, she is definitely a senior figure in the Hound Circle. Her exploration experience is even more than half of the people in the Hunting God hunting group. The data of exploration experience is not based on simple statistics. It doesn't mean that you are a 10-year-old hunter if you explored the ruins 10 years ago and then again 10 years later. According to the official recognition standards, only if you explore D-level or above ruins more than 5 times in a year, the year will be counted as experience. She was indeed an illegal hunter, but at that time she was not a member of the Grey Bird hunting group. She was bought by another hunting group. Ghost Owl explained. Did you buy it? To be a scout, the hound couldn't help but ask. The scout in his sentence naturally refers to the first type of consumables. Yes. But perhaps due to talent, or perhaps due to luck, she survived 4 ruins explorations and redeemed her freedom. After that, she joined several hunting groups. He worked as an illegal hunter without a license for several years, and all his positions were scout positions, until he was spotted by the then leader of the Grey Bird hunting group during a joint exploration operation, and spent a lot of money to dig him over. Of course, she was already an adult at that time and obtained a legal qualification as a hunter. Ghost Owl added at the end, as if he was worried that others would misunderstand the Grey Bird hunting group. I just checked online. Ivan's voice interrupted. The elite ruins hunter hummingbird obtained the hunter qualification certificate in 939 of the new era. He has been in more than a dozen hunting groups, and he was the last hunting group to stay. It was the Grey Bird hunting group. He was a quite famous scout in the hunter circle at that time, but he died unfortunately while the Grey Bird hunting group was exploring the A-009 ancient Bronze City ruins in 941. In 941, the Grey Bird hunting group died while exploring the A-009 ancient Bronze City ruins. Yan repeated the sentence and couldn't help but widen his eyes. In other words, it's the video this time. As soon as he finished speaking, a dazzling white light suddenly lit up in the video screen. Yan, Hound, and the others couldn't help but squint their eyes, while Kaylan stared at the screen. The camera was shaking violently. The person in charge of carrying the video equipment seemed to have fallen to the ground while retreating. The camera was first jerked to the sky directly above, and then quickly dropped down to look directly at the sky. Ahead. Directly ahead was the source of the white light that almost blinded everyone just now. At that time, there was a thick energy shield. To be precise, it should be a dazzling wall of light. This wall of light blocked the entire street. As for the scout hummingbird who was originally standing at that position, he completely disappeared into this wall completely made of water before he could even utter a scream. Not even a trace was left in the curtain wall of light composed of energy bodies. Is she dead? Yan was obviously a little frightened, and he even stuttered when he spoke. Yes, Ghost Owl's voice sounded again. She died, not even a body was left behind. The whole person and the equipment on her body were all vaporized the moment the light curtain appeared. The wall of light did not stay in place, but began to advance along the street. The hunters of the Grey Bird hunting group ran away. They reacted quickly, but even so, several hunters running at the end of the team were still exposed. The wall caught up with him and swallowed it in. When the wall of light disappeared and everyone stopped, the person carrying the video equipment turned back. The 4 forwards who were originally behind him were now the only ones left. The last person. In the process of escaping, another hunter accidentally tripped and fell to the ground. No one helped him because it was too late, and saving people would only increase casualties, although he was not seen in the camera. The scene where the wall catches up, but through the sudden stop of the shouting outside the scene, his ending can naturally be imagined. A wall of light that suddenly appeared and disappeared instantly caused the elite Grey Bird hunting group to lose 5 hunters. The light wall moves very fast. According to my judgment, it is about 8 to 10 meters per second. This is very close to the world record of the 100-meter race in the old era, Ghost Owl said. In other words, without the help of a vehicle, only enhanced humans can outrun this thing, Layton said. Yes. The duration of the light wall is not fixed. Some only last for a few seconds, and some last for nearly half a minute, Ghost Owl said. You mean, you encountered the wall of light more than once in the ruins of the ancient Bronze City? Kaylan asked. Then do you know what the triggering conditions of this mechanism are? Unfortunately, the triggering conditions are completely unknown. Ghost Owl's tone was very serious. I'm not even sure whether the light wall was triggered by us or appeared randomly in the city. Sometimes, multiple people will even appear at the same time. Wall of Light. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 644. And you may not be able to avoid them even if you run fast. Those multiple walls of light often move towards each other and will trap people in the middle. Ghost Owl continued. What about upwards? What is the height of the light wall? Can it be avoided by flying? Layton couldn't help but ask. With the technical support of the YE Consortium and an almost unlimited budget, his cybernetic body has recently undergone several major changes. He even installed a flight module with seriously overpowered power, giving him the ability to fly in the air. The ability to stand still for long periods of time. Flying in the Bronze City is purely suicidal, even low-altitude ground-skimming flight will not work. Although we are not yet clear about the triggering mechanism of the horizontal light wall, the vertical light wall triggering rate is almost 100%. Ghost Owl. After a pause, he continued, inside a building, no matter how high you go, as long as there is a ceiling above your head, the light wall will not appear. But if you are in an open space, as long as you are more than 5 feet above the ground meters, the vertical light wall will always be triggered. It will press down directly on top of you, much faster than the horizontal one, and you can't avoid it at all. 5 meters high, that is to say, if you jump too high, it will trigger the light wall, right? Right. As if to verify the Ghost Owl's words, just when the group of hunters in the video turned into a small alley, a wall of light appeared in front and behind them at the same time. A tall man with both hands and feet appeared at the same time. The hunter, who had a mechanical prosthetic leg, saw this and climbed directly up the wall of the building. The moment he was more than 5 meters above the ground, a light curtain came down from directly above at a speed that was difficult for ordinary people to react. The hunter only had time to let out a short exclamation before most of his body was swallowed up by the light curtain. His flesh was instantly vaporized, leaving only some melted and deformed prosthetic parts scattered on the ground, emitting a red light. But what made everyone breathe a sigh of relief was that the light curtain only pressed down to 5 meters above the ground and then stopped continuing. Although the hair of other hunters was curled by the heat radiated from the light curtain, at least they temporarily escaped the fate of being destroyed by the group. The video freezes at this point. It seems that the internal components have malfunctioned due to impact and high temperature. A black and white snowflake flashes on the screen, and the screen cuts back to the shot of the Ghost Owl. What happened next? Yan asked, his breathing a little rapid. How did you escape? We were lucky. We found the entrance to a building and hid inside the building before we were caught between 2 light walls. Ghost Owl said, the light wall will only clean up the streets outside, but not the outside causes damage to creatures inside the building. That means the building is safe, Hound said to himself while stroking the stubble on his chin, but now the ruins of the city have been occupied by heretics, and they will definitely destroy most of the buildings. The entrance is sealed. Even if it is not sealed, I'm afraid it will just be a trap left by them. According to official public records, the Greybird hunting group was the first team to discover the mobile light wall mechanism of the ancient Bronze City ruins. Didn't the previous hunters encounter this thing? Yvonne asked. This has to start with the structure of the ancient Copper City ruins. Ghost Owl took out a sensor pen and drew a circle on the screen. The ruins of the ancient Bronze City are a perfect circle, with the center of the circle as the intersection point. 6 straight lines running through the entire circle cut the circle into 12 sector-shaped areas of equal area. And inside the circle, there are 2 more isocentric circles with exactly equal spacing divide the ancient Bronze City ruins into 3 areas, based on depth, or distance from the center of the central circle. These 3 areas are called the inner ring, middle ring and outer ring respectively. Of course, the geometry I drew looks simple, but the actual terrain is much more complex. Various streets and passages are crisscrossed in each block. Each block is equivalent to an independent maze, And each independent maze is related to each other through ingenious design. That's why I combine it with the formation in Chinese legends is connected together. The urban area of this ruins looks very similar to the Ark. I just don't know if the housing prices in the inner ring are the same as those on the Ark, which are dozens or even hundreds of times higher than in the outer ring, murmured the Hound. The reason why previous explorers have not encountered these light walls and light curtains is because we are the first team of hunters to go deep into the middle ring area, Ghost Owl said. Using a sensor pen to scan the ancient bronze city ruins, several marks were made on the sketch. We entered from the third sector of the outer ring to the third sector of the middle ring. The sensor pen swiped across the screen, and a striking orange line appeared on the sector marked with the number 3 on the sketch, passing through the concentric circle dividing line from the outer ring area and entering the middle ring area. We lost a total of 9 hunters before successfully escaping from the central area to the outer area. Ghost Owl said, but it wasn't until we walked out that we noticed that we came out of the 8th sector of the outer area. You were so anxious that you took a detour from the 3rd sector to the 8th sector, Layton scratched his head. He didn't know why the Ghost Owl had such a complicated expression on his face. It's not normal to take a detour in the ruins. Something. No, Ghost Owl shook his head. Our moving routes are all recorded, because the appearance of the light wall is completely random, so we all choose the closest route as possible. Even if there are some deviations, then we should be the only way to come out is from the adjacent 2nd or 4th sector. With our travel distance, it is absolutely impossible to go around to the 8th sector that far away, unless we cross the entire ancient Copper City ruins. Maybe you have really traversed the entire ruins. In the maze built by the Alpha civilization, no one is reliable, whether it is the compass, the radio positioning device, or the human sense of direction, Hound said. I can be sure that we did not cross the ruins, because there are very clear dividing lines between the outer ring, the middle ring and the inner ring of the ancient Copper City ruins. If we mistakenly entered the inner ring, we would definitely cross that dividing line. But from the beginning to the end, we have been operating in the central area and have never seen the dividing line between the central and inner rings. If you have never entered the inner ring area, then the shortest route from the 3rd sector to the 8th sector should be like this. Yvonne also took out a sensor pen and drew a line that was almost close to the arc at the edge of the inner ring. Even this shortest route is much longer than the distance you moved when you escaped, right? Yvonne asked. That's right, Ghost Owl nodded. Even if the positioning equipment will be interfered with, the mechanical pedometer cannot make mistakes. Even if the calculation error is expanded to more than 5 times the standard value, the distance will still be far away. Not enough. At this moment, Kaylan, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly knocked on the table in front of him and said to the Hound, "Old dog, do you still remember the 9 stone chambers we encountered in the bottomless sinkhole?" 9 stone chambers, I remember that, but wasn't that thing our dream? The Hound nodded. Actually, we have been lying in that cave the whole time and have never been anywhere. Although the 9 stone chambers are a dream, theoretically speaking, they can be recreated in the real world. I suspect that there may be a similar structure in the Bronze City. You mean, movable block sections? Hound was stunned for a moment. I don't think it's strange that the stone chamber can move, but the entire block can change places without anyone noticing. Isn't that impossible? It doesn't have to be an entire block, it could be a street, half a square or even a separate building. As long as the city adopts a modular design, these are all possible. As long as Greybird hunting the buildings within the sight of the regiment's hunters have not changed, and it is difficult for them to perceive the displacement of the external plates. Kaylan paused for half a second, then continued, furthermore, in the state of being chased by a wall of light, even if the plates under their feet are moving, they may not be able to detect it as long as the movement is not particularly large. Ghost Owl was silent for a full minute, and then nodded seriously. Captain Kaylan, your analysis makes sense. In my memory, there are indeed no landmark buildings in that area that can be used as a benchmark. The clouds in the sky are also very thick, and there is no independent cloud group that can be used to judge the direction. If the ground is moving slowly, we really can't find it. Good guy, a city where each module can change its position at will like a Rubik's Cube. It's really a big project, Hound couldn't help but sigh. Although Ark also adopts a modular design, the plots in each area are fixed on the base. If these plots are to be mobile, it cannot be solved by simply adding a few engines and pulleys. Things. Block transformation, module movement. Ian's index finger tapped the table rhythmically. It's really a bit like those mazes with rich fantasy colors in legendary stories. The so-called formation is actually the formation arranged by the army when it is marching and fighting. People are alive, so the military formation is naturally alive too. A military formation that cannot change is easily broken by the enemy. All those famous military formations all of them are unpredictable and difficult to find flaws. Even if there are some unavoidable flaws, you can quickly change the formation to turn the flaws into traps, or even become decisions. The winning move. When people are alive, stones are dead. Zhuge used huge rocks to build a Bagua array to block the tens of thousands of Suqiao troops. This kind of story can obviously only appear in novels with a lot of fictional plots such as The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, unless these boulders can move. If we calculate it this way, let alone the 8th sector, it is possible for you to come out from any place in the ruins, the Hound said as he pulled out a thick and long stick. Nosehair said, you should be lucky that you were not sent directly to the inner ring, the middle ring is so dangerous. If you enter the inner ring, I'm afraid not many people can come out. Now the ruins of the Bronze City have been controlled by the heretical section, assuming that the city's blocks can really be moved at will. The method of manipulation must also be in their hands, Layton said with a look of embarrassment. Don't say let us break into the ruins and seize control. As long as the heretical sex bastards have some brains, we will never reach the core area of the ruins. There are worse things, Yvonne sighed. Suppose we have just killed the defenders of a heretical sect, maybe the land under our feet will bring us into a circle surrounded by a group of mutants in the next second. Lee, they don't even need to move, they just need to wait for the moving plate to bring the prey to the door, not to mention the overwhelming light curtain chasing after them. After entering this ruins, we are like those turtles, we can only be slaughtered by others, Layton agreed. It's like a turtle in a urn, big guy. If you don't know how to use idioms, just stop using them, okay? Our hunting group can't afford to lose this person. The Hound rolled his eyes at Layton and turned to look at Kaylan. Kaylan, the difficulty of the task is much higher than that of exploring S-class ruins. It is not an exaggeration to say that there is no chance of death, but I also know that we can't refuse this task. Look, how about you go and persuade the people above? People, let them change their tactics. How to persuade? To deal with this kind of target, don't use troops to attack it, just use long-range firepower to saturate it and raise the ruins to the ground. Before Kaylan could speak, Layton spoke first. Old man, aren't you more embarrassed than me? Do you think that is an ordinary exile settlement? Can a few missiles blow it up? That is an alpha civilization. It's a fortress, and it's a humming fortress with fully activated defense facilities. For our human weapons, even with full firepower, it can only scratch the itch. If nothing else, just say that this covers the whole city. The light curtain, do you know how powerful this system would be if used as an external defense shield? How big is it? Hound asked, raising his eyebrows. Remember the Kylan that nearly killed Leviathan? If the Kylan were used to hit the energy shield of the Bronze City, until the entire battleship was vaporized, it would not be possible to hit the city's energy shield. Any building. If I want to use this method to break the shield, I can only think of two things. What two? Noah's Ark and Yagunakota. Only their mass and volume can guarantee that they can penetrate the shield without being completely ablated. Layton immediately asked, what do you think? Is it possible for policymakers to adopt such tactics? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen Mi San. Chapter 645. The Hound rubbed his nose a little irritably and said, "Unless they are crazy, in fact, in my opinion, sending troops to attack a fully activated Alpha Ruins is essentially the same as being crazy. I also think this is a suicide mission." Leighton sighed. The technological level gap between the two warring parties is too big, and Ark's side has no chance of winning. Damn it, I would have never imagined that one day the Ark's army would be overwhelmed by those rats in the wilderness in terms of technology. It's so humming stupid. Why is that bullshit? Didn't the Prophet get killed while exploring the ruins? Isn't this really lucky? Actually, we are the same. Ivan lowered his voice and said to the Hound, "Old dog, you haven't noticed, since our group officially formed a group, there hasn't been any attrition in the process of exploring the ruins." The Hound was stunned. What Ivan said is correct. Since they formed a team, except for Zhang Lian who was killed in the glacier ruins, none of the team members have really had any accidents in the ruins. The only teammate they lost was because of the Arezaka Consortium. The reason has nothing to do with the ruins themselves. As for the people who died in the subsequent missions, whether they were members of the Polaris hunting group or agents of the Security Bureau, they could only be regarded as outsiders and not one of our own. As for the 6 of them who came out of the glacier ruins alive together, there has been no attrition until now, and it can be regarded as a legend in the hunter circle. Not to mention, the ruins they explore later are either S level or A level. As long as other hunters can come out of this level of ruins alive, they will have more to brag about in the future, and the whole team has 0 deaths and continues to explore high-level ruins. Level relics, hounds. They were completely unaware that they had created a record that was difficult for others to match. Before the transplantation of living armor, Ian's own combat effectiveness could only be considered average among elite hunters. However, the special abilities he unexpectedly acquired can greatly improve the team's survival rate and the success of exploring ruins. Efficiency, thinking about it this way, the efficiency of a prophet with the same ability in exploring ruins must also be terrible. After all, he gained his abilities more than 10 years earlier than Kaylan. The only difference between Kaylan and the others is time. If Kaylan is given 10 years to develop most of the functions of Yagunakotaur, the ruins of an ancient copper city will not be able to withstand this ship from a more advanced civilization. Super battleship. Unfortunately, there is the word "if" at the beginning of this paragraph, and this is just a hypothesis. Kaylan and the others are still having a meeting to discuss the plan to attack the ruins of the Bronze City, but the field army has already begun to take action. It takes time to assemble a large force, but this does not prevent a small group of elite units from carrying out infiltration operations at the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. The Gophers of the 574th Special Forces Team of the Field Service Corps were one of the first combat units to receive the mission. As their name suggests, the Gopher team is equipped with the only Super Gopher heavy-duty drilling rig in the entire Ark. This drilling rig was modified on the chassis of the Mammoth tank. Note 1. The front end of the drilling rig is equipped with 6 largest tricone drill bits, with a total of more than 12,000 diamond drill teeth. No matter how hard it is, rock formations can also be cut and minced as easily as freshly baked shortbread. At the same time, this drilling rig is also equipped with 2 high-power pumps that use crystal energy to pump the mud generated during excavation several kilometers away to ensure the smooth progress of excavation operations. At this moment, the drilling rig is located in the rock formation 140 meters deep underground, 11 kilometers away from the ancient Copper City ruins. Several members of the Gopher team gathered in the control room of the drill rig. In order to save energy, all unnecessary light sources in the control room were turned off, leaving only the fluorescent light emitted by the screen and indicator lights illuminating their faces. Viewed from a third perspective, it feels like a low-quality horror film from the old era. There are still 11 kilometers left. At this speed, we will have to dig for a day and a night to reach directly under the ruins of the ancient Bronze City, the engineer who was sitting in the passenger seat and controlling the drill said, but the problem is, If we get too close to the ruins, the power of the pump will not be enough to discharge the mud directly out of the tunnel, and a transfer station must be built. If you set up a transfer station a few kilometers away from the ruins, you will definitely be discovered by the enemy, right? Another soldier sitting in the back row said. Of course the transfer station cannot be built on the surface. The engineer who spoke earlier shook his head. My suggestion is to build the transfer station directly in the tunnel. You only need to reserve an opening for the follow-up troops to pass through. The rest of the space is completely fine. It is used to install the second set of silent pumps, and connect several kilometers of pipelines, so that the mud can be discharged to the ground 20 kilometers away. I have reported this plan to the headquarters. The captain of the Gopher team nodded. The silent pump and extension pipe will be shipped directly from Mukake base, and it will take about 8 hours to transport and assemble. The action is really fast. The engineer sighed. I heard that this time, the entire field corps has been mobilized, and hundreds of thousands of people will be transferred here in the future. That's not what we need to care about. The captain frowned. Our mission is to dig this tunnel, and when the battle starts, send the special operations troops directly to the ruins of the ancient bronze city. I know. Before the engineer finished speaking, the entire control room suddenly shook violently, and on the operation panel in front of him, a series of green indicator lights turned red in the blink of an eye. What's going on? The captain held his hand on the roof of the control room and asked in a deep voice. The drill stopped. Hey, it's strange. I checked the equipment up and down and found no fault. The engineer slid his fingers on the screen, and the 6 huge drills were divided into dozens of independent ones. Modules, however, the status displayed by each module is everything is normal, but after putting them together, the drill bit just cannot move. Is the pump malfunctioning? Or is the pipeline blocked? The driver sitting in the driver's seat on the left is a muscular man. He turned around from the narrow driver's seat with some difficulty. Come and say to the others, if the mud cannot be discharged smoothly, the safety device will lock the drill bit. This possibility cannot be ruled out. The engineer nodded. Someone has to go down and take a look. Basil, get out of the car and take a look, the captain said to a soldier wearing light power armor who was sitting outside the control room. Pay attention to safety. This place is already deep in enemy-occupied territory. Anything can happen. It can happen. The soldier named Basil nodded silently. Just as he stood up, he was pulled back by the captain. Wait a minute, I'd better go with you, the captain said, taking off the breathing mask and carbine hanging on the bulkhead. I always feel that things are a bit strange, so I have to go and see for myself to feel at ease. The two pushed open the hatch at the rear of the control room and climbed up along a vertical passage with a ladder. Although the Super Gopher transformed from the mammoth tank site is very large, its internal space is actually filled to the brim with pumps, crystallization engines and energy conversion devices, leaving little room for the crew. Not much bigger than an ordinary tank. 2 members of the Gopher team got out one after another. Basil, who was wearing power armor, turned on the searchlight on his shoulder and turned the light beam around the car body. No abnormalities were found, Basil said in a low voice. He usually doesn't like to talk, because for a special team whose main task is drilling operations, his presence as a fireman is really redundant. Gopher the team rarely received missions that required combat. As time went by, Basil, who was already relatively introverted, became even less vocal. Don't let your guard down, the captain said solemnly. Wait a minute, something seems wrong. Basil turned his head and looked at his captain with a puzzled expression. Basil, just say something, the captain said. What did you say? The puzzled look on Basil's face became even more serious. Didn't you notice that when we were talking, there was no sound at all in the headphones? The captain pointed to the communication device hanging on his head. The reason why we can hear each other's voices is entirely because we are relying on it's very close, but there's no sound coming out of the earphones. By the way, when I'm talking, is there any sound in your earphones? No, Basil shook his head. Then can you get in touch with the people in the car? The captain asked again. No, Basil still shook his head. It seems that either our communication devices are broken at the same time, or there is some extremely strong interference here. The interference is even so strong that when the two of us face each other, the radio communication will fail. The captain said. Turning around, he turned around, raised the hatch, and shouted into the car, "The radio communication seems to be interfered with. Have you noticed it?" No. The engineer's voice echoed from the passage. Our communications with the headquarters are all normal. Idiot, we use wired communication with the headquarters, so of course there will be no interference. The captain couldn't help but cursed. Check whether the remaining sets of radio devices can still work normally. 10 seconds later, the voice of the engineering soldier came over again. Report to the captain, the remaining 4 sets of radio communication devices have all failed. Even zero-distance communication cannot be achieved. Such a strong interference, even if we are in a tunnel surrounded by metal ores, this should not happen. Take a look at the radiation intensity of the surrounding environment to see if it is abnormal. The radiation intensity outside the vehicle is below the safety threshold and no abnormalities are found, the engineer replied. I guess so, the captain whispered to himself. Not only did he not wear radiation protection clothing, but because of the crowded and hot environment in the carriage, he didn't even wear a combat uniform jacket. He only wore a short-sleeved summer uniform with 2 pairs of his arms were completely exposed. If the radiation intensity in the environment could be high enough to affect wireless communications, his body would have already experienced discomfort. You guys stay in the car, while Basil and I go check around. After the captain said that, he climbed down from the roof of the car with Basil. Although the cross-section of the tunnel dug by the Super Gopher is very large, due to the huge size of the drill itself, there is only less than 2 meters of space around the body, and only one person can barely pass through. The leader of the Gopher team was originally he planned to split up with Basil and circle the car in 2 directions. But for some reason, just when he was about to say this, he felt a sense of uneasiness in his heart for no reason. Basil, let's work together and start the inspection from this side first. You are responsible for the part above the crawler track. I will check the bottom of the vehicle and the exposed part of the pump. As for the mud conveying pipe, we will leave it to the end. Understood. Basil didn't say much and walked forward with the electromagnetic assault rifle. The captain took out a tactical flashlight from his pocket, mounted it on the Picatinny rail that came with the carbine, bent down, and looked under the car. At the moment when the light of the tactical flashlight swept towards the bottom of the car, he seemed to see a shadow flash past and dive deeper into the darkness. Basil, the captain immediately whispered, there seems to be something under the car. Basil, who was wearing power armor, did not look back. He stood there blankly, seemingly stunned. Basil, the captain thought Basil had also seen something surprising, but when he looked in the direction he was facing, however, under the bright searchlight, there was only a dark rock wall covered with drill bits in front of him. Crushed gravel. What's the matter with you? The captain patted Basil, but there was still no response. This made the captain suddenly nervous. He quickly walked around to the front of Basil, only to find that under the transparent mask of the power armor helmet, there was something shocking. It's a white skeleton. The captain was horrified and hit the chest plate of the powered armor with the butt of his gun. The entire powered armor fell straight down and hit the ground with a loud noise. P.S. Thanks to book friend 20180918102252805 for the 5,000 starting coins. Thank you to book friend 20210511230655807 for the 500 starting coins. Thank you Hitong for the 100 starting coins. PPS Note 1, Mammoth Tank, the largest combat vehicle of the Arc Field Corps Land Armored Force, with a body length of more than 20 meters, a height of nearly 4 meters, and a weight of approximately 260 tons. The main weapon is a 160 mm caliber twin cannon. This tank is an improvement and development of the Maus super heavy tank that the German military industry failed to complete in the old era. After adding an anti-gravity device, a crystal engine and an energy shield generator, the shortcomings of the original Maus tank have been eliminated. A perfect solution, this also makes the Mammoth tank a veritable mobile fortress. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 646. The captain of the Gopher team was immediately startled and jumped back a big step. In the next moment, he immediately raised the carbine in his hand and pointed the muzzle upward. He didn't see what hit Basil, but years of rigorous training still made his body respond almost reflexively. No matter what happened, the first thing he had to do was fire your weapon and use the sound of the gunshot to alert the team members who are still in the vehicle. But just when he was about to pull the trigger, he suddenly discovered to his horror that he could no longer feel the existence of his fingers. Half a second later, a heartbreaking pain came from his wrist. The carbine lost its support and fell to the ground, and the tactical flashlight mounted on the underside of the handguard shone right on his right hand. The flesh, tendons, and skin of the entire right hand had completely disappeared, leaving only the white bones, which emitted a horrifying reflection under the light. Ah! The short scream stopped just as it started. He seemed to feel something welling up from the depths of his throat, followed by a salty taste in his mouth. Inside the car. It's strange, the captain and Basil have been out for several minutes. The engineer said, just now they told us that the radio communication was interfered with. Why is there no movement at all now? Isn't there a muffled sound just now? I guess it was Basil's power armor hitting the stone, right? I don't think so, and besides that muffled sound, don't you think it's a bit too quiet now? The engineer said again. The armor of this car is so thick, and there is a special barrier between the armor layers to absorb the noise during drilling operations. It is normal that we can't hear the outside sounds. The driver said with a frown. It's been 8 minutes. At normal speed, it won't take that long to patrol the vehicle body, right? The engineer subconsciously touched the pistol holster on his waist. I don't know, maybe the source of the fault has been found. Another soldier scratched his head and said. If you find the source of the fault, shouldn't you tell us? The two of them didn't even bring repair tools. Even if they find the fault, they can't fix it. The engineer spoke faster and faster, and he couldn't help but feel guilty in his tone. There was a hint of anxiety. Lao Le, can the monitor outside the car see them? The macho pilot who was called Lao Le shook his head. Ours is a tank-based model, and it is not the kind of all-round view cockpit used for fighter jets and mechas. In addition to the main monitor directly in front, there are only 6 cameras installed on the car body. As he spoke, he pointed to the surveillance screen that was cut into 6 pieces on the lower right side of the screen in front of him. However, there was nothing in the screen except the dugout rocks. Due to the design flaws of the Mammoth tank, the rotation angle of these surveillance cameras is almost negligible, and the range they can see is also very limited. But in fact, this cannot be regarded as a design flaw. After all, tanks mainly rely on the monitors and peepholes on the turret to provide vision. The surveillance cameras mounted on the chassis are dispensable, but for this one, they were removed. For the Super Gopher whose turret has been replaced by a large drilling rig, those cameras are the only field of view. They should be in the blind spot of the camera. Lao Le added, how about one of you go out and take a look? SHH, the engineer suddenly stretched out his hand to cover Lao Le's mouth and lowered his voice and said, listen carefully, there seems to be a strange sound up there. Everyone in the team immediately held their breath, and the entire carriage became silent for a moment, so that everyone else also heard the strange sound mentioned by the engineer. It was a sound of sharp and hard objects scratching against the smooth metal surface. Although it was very subtle, it sounded like an itchy and uncomfortable feeling all over the body. It was easy to think of some shapes. Creepy multi-legged arthropods. You're all here, right? The engineer typed out each word on the screen. Everyone looked at each other and nodded in unison. Team leader, he, Luo, Ellie, K, Nang, already, Jing, sacrifice, sacrifice. The engineer typed again, outside, face, east, west, down, 1, 1, the mark is us. What should I do? Lao Le glanced at him and asked with a simple tactical gesture. The engineer did not answer directly, but pulled out the pistol from the holster, and then pulled out a magazine with a yellow and black warning mark from the chest equipment pocket. Due to the special nature of this mission, each unit participating in the battle was issued a certain amount of active ammunition. For teams like the Gopher Squad that needed to go deep behind enemy lines, the amount of ammunition they received was unambiguous at least. A small encounter with the seed of corrosion is definitely more than enough. 1/3 of the engineer's magazine is filled with unsealed active ammunition. Armor-piercing, explosive, and active ammunition are loaded in groups of 3. For experienced veterans, as long as they can be sure at the core position, 1 round of 3 bursts of short bursts can kill a corrosion seed. Others silently took out their weapons and replaced them with active ammunition and magazines. Everyone had a tense face and tried their best to adjust their breathing. Although they could be considered an elite force, they were not a serious combat unit after all. In addition, Basil, who had the strongest fighting ability in the team, and the commander-in-chief, the captain's life and death are unknown at this time. No matter from which angle you look at it, the situation can only be described as terrible. What's more, in this narrow tunnel, there is no room to maneuver at all. If they really encounter an enemy, they can only choose to fight to the death. The rustling sound gradually moved away from the top of the car, but everyone's expressions became more solemn, because the direction of the sound was exactly the hatch located behind the roof of the car, used for entering and exiting the car. Lao Le, have you sent a message to the headquarters? The engineer stopped typing on the screen and said directly. He knew very well that the thing outside obviously knew that there was someone in the carriage, and wanted to hide the traces at this time. It doesn't make any sense anymore. Just sent it. The macho driver nodded. I said we were attacked by unknown enemies in the tunnel. The captain and firemen are missing, and the rest of the team members are clinging to the car. As he spoke, he took out his weapons from under the seat. They were 2 Type 01 carbines with shortened barrels, and removed the stocks. If these guns were used by ordinary people, they would probably, even if you use 2 hands to control a gun, you may not be able to suppress the violent recoil. But the macho man was indeed a macho man. Lao Le turned around and lay on the back of the driver's seat with 1 hand in each hand and pointed the gun at the passage behind the car. However, his 2 explosive short rifles were not the most powerful. Another soldier took out a heavy machine gun directly from the equipment box and inserted it directly into the telescopic bracket reserved at the bottom of the carriage. Turning around, the gun bolt was pulled, directly blocking the entrance to the rear of the carriage. Lao Le, has there been any reply from the headquarters? The engineer stared at the end of the passage and asked softly. The macho pilot shook his head. It has been almost 10 seconds since I sent it, and there is no reply. It seems the situation can't get worse. The engineer couldn't help but reveal a wry smile on his face. The communication between the super drill rat and the headquarters relies on communication cables attached to the mud discharge pipes. According to the speed of wired communication, it would not even take a second for them to send information here and transmit it back to the rear, and like for this kind of emergency communication, even if the headquarters cannot come up with a reinforcement plan for a while, it will at least reply with a received as soon as possible to stabilize the morale of the military. But now, they haven't received even a received text message, which can only mean one thing. The communication cable between the Super Gopher and headquarters has been severed. A soldier couldn't help but take out a photo from his pocket. The photo showed a plump young woman with a smiling face. The young woman also held a fat boy under the age of 1 in her arms. Although it was said that looking at family photos on the battlefield would set a death flag, He always felt that if he didn't take one last look at them now, he might never see them again in the future. Not only him, but the other soldiers of the Gopher team were also ready to die in battle at this moment. But the sounds outside suddenly disappeared without a trace, and there was no movement from the hatch cover. "What's going on?" Lao Le touched the engineer soldier with his elbow in confusion. "Could it be that thing can't get in?" "It's also possible." The engineer nodded. "After all, the armor of our super Gopher is still very thick." "Then what are we going to do now?" The soldier holding the handle of the heavy machine gun turned around and asked. "If the other party doesn't come in, are we going to go out? After all, we don't know yet whether the captain and Basil are dead or alive." "Woolen cloth. I also think we have to go find them." The soldier who just looked at his wife's photo nodded. "You must not go out now," the engineer said anxiously, even his voice involuntarily raised. "Maybe that thing is squatting outside now, waiting for us to go out and die." "Then are we just spending time here?" the machine gunner asked. "The headquarters must have discovered by now that the communication with us has been cut off. It won't be long before reinforcements arrive." "Don't worry, everyone," the engineer said. "Old Ellie, you are responsible for monitoring the outside of the car. Tell me immediately if there is anything unusual. Others, don't let your guard down, keep your weapons loaded at all times." Except for the captain of the Gopher team, the highest military rank in the entire team was the engineer corps. After the captain disappeared, the responsibility of command naturally fell on his shoulders. "Okay," the macho driver Lao Le nodded. He turned off the safety of the two guns and turned around with difficulty, but his body had not completely turned around. He just looked back at the screen and said, the dirty words immediately blurted out. The monitor was destroyed." "What did you say?" The engineer was stunned, and immediately turned his head. He saw that the 6 screens that were originally surveillance screens were now filled with large black and white snowflakes. "That thing must still be out there." Lao Le immediately grabbed the gun he had just put down. "Why don't you rush out and fight it?" "Don't." The engineer quickly grabbed Lao Le's arm. "Can you check if the engine still works? Let's go backwards along the tunnel and go back to the reinforcements sent by the headquarters first. Retreating will crush communication cables and transmission pipelines. Moreover, our mission..." Before Lao Le could finish his words, he was interrupted by the engineering soldier. "The cable has been cut. As for the transmission pipeline, as it is now, the mission cannot continue. If we can communicate with the headquarters, we will definitely be advised to retreat." He paused and continued, "I order the Gopher team to abandon the mission and withdraw from the operation area immediately. If there is any responsibility afterwards, it will be borne by me alone." As soon as the engineer finished speaking, a more violent vibration than before came from outside the carriage, and then the entire carriage began to tilt to one side. "What's going on? What happened?" The machine gunner immediately hugged the heavy bracket, while another soldier helped him hold the machine gun to prevent the heavy machine gun from falling off the base. As for Lao Le and the engineering soldier, they directly stretched out their hands to support the top of the car, and at the same time used their knees to support the seats below. The car tilted about 50 degrees and then stopped. I think it was because the car body hit the tunnel wall and could not continue to flip. That thing outside seems to have lifted the car." Lao Le said incoherently. "How is it possible? How is it possible? The weight of this thing is nearly 400 tons, that thing's power, impossible." Compared to the panic of others, the engineer was the first to calm down. He immediately put his eyes on the floor under his feet. He couldn't help but think of a very crucial thing, but it was precisely because of this that he thought of something very important. Something happened, and his back was instantly wet with cold sweat. The standard configuration of the Mammoth tank has a multi-layered composite armor on the bottom of the chassis that is used to defend against landmines, as a super burrower as an engineering instrument. In order to reduce excess load as much as possible, all the armor on the chassis were dismantled, leaving only a 12mm thick outer shell riveted with steel plates. Compared with other parts of the car body, the bottom of the vehicle is the weakest defense point. That thing, it plans to break in from under the car. P.S. Thanks to book friend 201905071806238665 for the 520 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 647. There was a loud stab sound, and a large seam was suddenly torn open in the floor of the carriage. The steel plate at the tier was folded to both sides, and a skinny, blackened arm stretched out from the outside and grabbed the edge of the steel plate. This is a human palm, but it doesn't look like a limb of a living person, but like it comes from a dried mummy. The ends of the fingers have long, sharp, and broken nails that are as sharp as claws. These nails scrape against the steel plate, making a continuous and heart-breaking sound. The engineer almost immediately thought of the sound coming from above his head not long ago. He originally thought it was some kind of multi-legged arthropod creature similar to a centipede, but now it seems that it is probably the harsh noise made by these nails scratching the armor of the car body. The crack in the steel plate became larger again, and a second black arm like a mummy stretched into the car, followed by the third and fourth. Could there be more than one monster under the car? No, that's not right. These arms are from the same body. The engineer felt as if his body had lost control, and an indescribable feeling of fear seized his heart. He wanted to pull the trigger, but found that the trigger seemed to be welded to death and could not be pulled. On the contrary, Lao Li roared immediately, picked up his two guns and shot at those arms. But as soon as the bullets came into contact with these arms were immediately shattered. To be precise, they were not shattered, but scattered apart. These arms turned into countless tiny black beetles in an instant. These small beetles moved extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye they were all over the machine gunner's body. The latter turned into a pale skeleton before he could make any sound, and fell inside the carriage. This speed is countless times more exaggerated than the shocking army ants on Earth. Insects, bugs. Lao Li was also dumbfounded at this time. His muzzle subconsciously followed the swarm of insects, but after these beetles gnawed away the flesh and blood of the machine gunner, they suddenly pounced on the man who had just looked at the photos of his wife and children. On top of the soldiers, Lao Li couldn't help but hesitate briefly. If he fired now, he wasn't sure how many bugs he could kill, but the teammate targeted by the bugs would definitely die. The full power of the 10mm caliber bullet will tear the human body cleanly and smash the organs. If you are shot at this distance, you will not even have a chance to be rescued. Or to put it another way, not even the whole body will be left behind. But in less than half a second, when Lao Li hesitated, the soldier followed in the footsteps of the machine gunner and was eaten up by these black beetles. The two forest white skeletons scattered and slid along the sloping floor to one end of the carriage. These black beetles not only ate up all the flesh and blood on the two people, but even the cartilage and tendons between the bones were not left. Down. But, these bugs. They don't seem to be full. On the other side, the first cruise fleet finally arrived at the anchoring airspace of Yagonactor and completed the handover with Fleet 0. Those researchers who were not seriously injured were also sent to the frontline supply base and devoted to the study of wolf-like creatures, although most of the research instruments and equipment were damaged during K-Ian's violent unloading process. But while K-Lan was dealing with the hijacking incident, Yes Consortium spent a lot of money to urgently purchase a batch from ARC and sent it over. In Ye Yan's words, it can be regarded as making up for the past. Although compared with the mistakes made by the Ye Family Consortium due to negligence, this compensation can only be said to be negligible, but neither K-Lan nor the Immortal Crew Association seems to have the intention to hold the Ye family responsible. The fat man Ye Yan secretly breathed a sigh of relief. However, before K-Lan even got hot, he immediately received an encrypted call from the Field Corps. The content of the call was probably that the field army originally planned to send a special team to dig tunnels to send Kaylan and others into the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. However, just a few minutes ago, this special team suddenly disappeared underground. The communication between them and the headquarters was also completely cut off. The Field Corps immediately dispatched a reinforcement force composed of about 100 elite soldiers and equipped with a large amount of active ammunition and various advanced weapons into the tunnel, but even when they were about to arrive at the location where the special team lost contact, this group of troops, the army of hundreds of people, suddenly lost all news. With the firepower of this team, even if they encounter a powerful SP-type mutant, they can poison the enemy to death by pouring a massive amount of active ammunition. To put it in perspective, even if they encounter a powerful SP-type mutant that attacked Mu, the giant centipede at the catch base can at least send some news back before it is completely destroyed. However, even if it was a scream before death, the command headquarters in the rear did not hear it. 1 second, the communication soldiers of this unit were still conducting routine reports as usual, and the next second, the entire communication channel fell into silence instantly, as if this unit had evaporated from the world at that moment. If you want to achieve this effect, after much deliberation, only the power of the Black Bishop can do it. The commander of the Field Corps immediately decided to report to the undead crew. Apart from the prophets, the Black Bishop heretic sect is the most feared existence. Their danger does not lie in their terrifying destructive power. If we talk about destructive power alone, more than 90% of the Black Bishops could not keep up with the giant centipede that appeared in the Mukake base. If they had just turned into a black skeleton, their threat would not even be as threatening as an SP-type mutant. The reason why they are feared is entirely because of the randomness, instability, and uncontrollability of the sacrificial rituals. Just as Kaylan had imagined before, send a dozen Black Bishops to sneak into the Ark, wear bomb vests and go directly to important facilities such as reactors, research institutes, ammunition depots, etc. to perform sacrifices and other rituals. Halfway through, detonate a bomb to interrupt the sacrifice by committing suicide. As long as one of them wins the jackpot and triggers a space storm, or an effect similar to a hydrogen bomb explosion, the damage caused is absolutely difficult to estimate, and it is even possible to directly blow up the entire Ark. Although Kaylan didn't know why the Prophet didn't adopt such simple and crude tactics, it didn't mean that the Ark military would underestimate the danger of the Black Bishop, no matter where it was, in the wilderness or inside the Ark. As long as it was found suspecting the existence of the Black Bishop, they will all rank the elimination of the Black Bishop as the highest priority mission goal. But this time, after the headquarters submitted the combat report to the Undead Crew Association, the Crew Association only responded with a very brief sentence: the original combat plan has been started in advance. The so-called original combat plan refers to the combat operation in which the Gopher team dug the tunnel and sent Kaylan and others into the ruins of the ancient Bronze City to seize control of the ruins. But now not only the tunnel is not good, 11 kilometers have not been opened, and even the Gopher team responsible for digging the tunnel and the follow-up reinforcements are still alive and dead. In this case, the Undead Crew will start the combat plan in advance, and the meaning is obvious. They want Kaylan to clean up this mess. Kaylan listened to the officer who called him tell the whole story. A curse word brewed in his throat for a long time, but he still didn't curse it out. He also knew that this officer, or rather, the entire Field Corps headquarters including this officer, was just a messenger, and scolding them was completely meaningless. If you want to scold me, you might as well go directly to the crew members. But when Kaylan tried to dial the communication number Pan left for him, what came from the other end of the phone was a robotic female voice saying the user you are calling is not in the service area. Isn't this a landline number? Is it not in the service area? Kaylan cut off the phone with some displeasure. The hound beside him patted him on the shoulder and comforted him. I have done this before. I've seen it a lot in the army. Many of the orders were thought up by the people at the top just by patting their heads. Well, maybe it wasn't the patting on the head but the patting on the ass. They never consider the specific situation of the people below. Anyway, if plan A doesn't work, there is still plan B, if plan B fails, there is still plan C. As for the life and death of those who implement these plans, who cares? Hound poured a glass of soda and handed it to Kaylan, then continued, just think that the waiter has resigned, and the food that was originally brought to the table for you has become a buffet. Anyway, this is a rotten dish to begin with. It doesn't matter whether it looks good or not. I would say that instead of opposing this surprise attack, it would be better for the people above to cancel the entire combat plan. The storming of the ruins of the ancient bronze city looks like it is killing people. Push it through the meat grinder. I also think the old dog is right. Layton nodded. This combat plan was drawn up too hastily. From the discovery of the traces of the heretical sect to the decision of the entire combat operation, there was not even an hour. There is not enough time, even if those extremist organizations from the old era wanted to launch a terrorist attack, they would have to start planning at least several days in advance. But we have no way to refuse. Kaylan sighed. This is just like old dog, your army has received a mission that is obviously a death mission. In addition to obeying the order, you can only choose to defect. The third option is from the beginning. It doesn't exist, of course. You can ignore orders, but disobeying orders on the spot is no different from defecting. The hound suddenly fell silent. He stared at Kaylan fiercely, breathing heavily, and unable to say a word. Ian's words touched upon the past that he least wanted to mention. Indeed, at that time, he knew that his troops were being used as bait, but he still had no choice but to obey and send his men to hell with his own hands. Even if there was trouble later, it was only because the soldiers who died did not receive the compensation they deserved. Compensation, if he had disobeyed from the beginning, he would have been shot long ago. There is no point in mentioning this now. 33 glanced at the hound with complicated eyes, and then focused on Kaylan. You might as well discuss how to activate this early combat plan. The situation is not optimistic, or to put it simply, the situation has gotten worse. Kaylan said, the Gopher team and subsequent reinforcements should have been wiped out. Obviously, this tunnel has entered the ruins. The heretical sect's combat plan has been noticed by the heretic section. Even if we eliminate the enemies in the tunnel and get through the last 11 kilometers, the entire action plan cannot be regarded as a surprise attack at all. The heretical sect in the ruins can completely wait and work. Waiting for us at the exit of the tunnel. This isn't called infiltration warfare at all, the hound said angrily after his breathing became slightly calmer. This is called throwing yourself into a trap. That's not necessarily true. As long as the power is strong enough, a surprise attack can completely turn into a force attack. 33 shook his head. With the two of you, I think the heretical sect will most likely misjudge the strength of the infiltration team. It's an opportunity. 33's eyes moved from Kaylan to Ze-Lugo. He had never met Ze-Lugo, and unlike Caoge, he didn't have a general idea of Ze-Lugo's abilities. He didn't even know that Ze-Lugo was a hunter. A member of the divine hunting group or the family member of a certain member. However, his fighting instinct kept reminding him that this girl with a somewhat perfect appearance was definitely better than anything he had ever seen on the battlefield or in the ruins. Monsters are all scary. If 33 had encountered Ze-Lugo alone in the wilderness, he wouldn't have even thought of fighting him. Turn around, run away, maybe there would be a glimmer of hope. It's just a glimmer of hope. He didn't know how to describe this feeling. It was the unique sense of danger that a veteran warrior had, but he was also glad that at least this girl was on their side now. You mean, you want Ze-Lugo to participate in the operation? Kaylan turned his head and glanced at Ze-Lugo, who was playing the game console, and couldn't help but hesitate. In fact, he was very reluctant to let Ze-Lugo fight the heretical sect, but with his own strength, if the enemy was a black bishop, he really might not be sure of winning. Like the black mummy on the Hercules transport plane before, he had no choice but to rely on Ze to get rid of that guy. What's more, the Black Bishop in the tunnel is only the first level, and there are more enemies and traps waiting for them later. Before Kaylan made a decision, Ze took the initiative to put down the game console in his hand and said to Kaylan, "I want to go. This operation is very dangerous, and the chance of escaping unscathed is very low," Kaylan said to her. "Without me, your chance of surviving unharmed would be even lower," Ze said. "Actually, you know very well that my own safety is the least thing to worry about. You are worried that I will lose control, so you don't want me to participate in this combat operation, right?" Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 648. I just. Kaylan was still organizing words in his mind, but Ze suddenly stood up, looked at Kaylan seriously and said, "I want to protect you." That's exciting." The hound tugged at Layton's sleeve. "Why do I feel like the eldest lady is going green?" A Chenyajin came out halfway. "The key is that this Chenyajin really has 3 damn axes." "What are you talking about?" "What are you talking about?" Layton was stunned for a moment, obviously not understanding what the hound was saying. "I don't think so. Kaylan is already engaged to the eldest lady, and everything that should happen between the two of them has happened." "Kaylan doesn't look like the kind of scumbag who would cheat," Yvonne said. Taking a sip of vodka, he said with a serious face, "I think the eldest lady has a better chance of winning. For Ze Kaylan should just treat her as a younger sister. In terms of looks, that little girl Ze is slightly better, but they are pretty much the same, but the advantage of the little girl is that she is young." Tisk tisk. Hound lowered his voice and discussed, "The main thing is to look at Kaylan. That's good. If he is a perverted Lilicon, then the little girl is basically stable. If he likes a Yuja type of woman, then the eldest lady still has a chance of winning. Can't you just want them all?" No one could have imagined that the usually honest-looking Mongolian man said something shocking at this time. In ancient times, as long as we Mongolian men were strong enough, it didn't matter how many wives we wanted. Besides, don't those rich people on the Ark now own several women? "Well, what you said, Zwilajito, is a solution." Hound rubbed the stubble on his chin, "but if I choose to take them all, will the eldest lady be jealous?" Kaylan has to solve this problem himself." Zwilajito touched his shiny forehead and showed an honest smile. "It's better for us not to interfere in other people's housework." Several men here gathered together and discussed the gossip enthusiastically, while in another corner, Valentina had her hands folded in front of her chest, leaning against the mecha, looking at Kaylan and Ze from a distance. Although her face was expressionless, there was a flash of unknown loss in her eyes. She had just completed her daily physical training. Her half-undressed one-piece driving suit was wrapped around her waist. Her upper body was only wearing a sweat-soaked sports bra. Shocking old injuries and scars could be seen everywhere on her pale body. The heat generated by exercise continues to rise from the body. She heard others say that Major Chi had received amnesty and had his original military status restored. As long as a series of handover procedures were completed, he would come here, which made Valentina feel a little confused. She joined the god hunting group and followed Kaylan and others to complete various tasks in order to exchange for enough chips to redeem Chi Hanfan from prison. But now, this originally seemingly distant goal has been achieved with ease. She felt that somewhere in her heart seemed to be empty, and there was a strange feeling that was so weird that she couldn't describe it. She once asked Qin Zhao in private, and Qin Zhao said that this was called the long-lost sense of relaxation and freedom. It's like all the money owed has been paid back. This is how it feels to be debt-free and light-hearted. You don't have to carry anything anymore and you can live for yourself. Isn't that great? These were Qin Zhao's exact words. Live for yourself. Valentina remembered that Guy once said this to herself. For Major Chi Hanfan, Valentina is more of a teacher and father figure, but for Kaylan, even she herself can't explain what it feels like. Okay, if you must go. Kaylan rubbed his temples helplessly, but you can only take action when I ask you to take action. OKZE Lugo nodded. Other candidates to participate in this operation. Kaylan glanced at everyone one by one, but before he could name them, an officer wearing the uniform of a second lieutenant of the Field Corps appeared in his field of vision. Are you here in such a hurry to urge us to set off? Kaylan couldn't help but frowned. Mr. Kaylan, there is a special supply that I need you to receive. The second lieutenant quickly ran to Kaylan and handed him a tablet. What kind of supplies require me to come and sign for them personally? Kaylan was slightly startled. If it is weapons and equipment sent by the Field Corps, it is the same if it is received directly by Fleet Zero, if it is said that this thing requires him to come in person. Acceptance, that can only mean that this is probably something that cannot be made public. It's a tactical mecha. The second lieutenant took half a step closer and lowered his voice and said to Kaylan, the people above said that this is a decisive battle equipment specially distributed to the God Hunting Group. Mecha? Equipment for decisive battles. Kaylan was even more confused. Except for Layton's mecha, Valentina was the only pilot in the entire hunting group, but Valentina had was replaced by the Augustus newly developed by the Consortium. In Yayan's words, within the next 10 years, there will not be a machine with stronger performance than the Augustus on the Ark. The gap between the current top customized aircraft and Augustus can only be described as spanning several generations. As for ordinary mass-produced aircraft, that is not to mention. Not counting our U0026D costs, just the material costs alone, the cost of one Augustus is enough to manufacture hundreds of mass-produced Phoenix skeleton airframes. Will the undead crew send a mecha at this time? Kaylan really didn't understand what their purpose was. Kaylan subconsciously set his sights on Yayan, who had just arrived in Yagunactor. Kaylan asked him with his eyes, do you know what this is? Seeing Kaylan looking at him, Yayan immediately shook his head like a rattle, and even the fat on his cheeks flew up. I don't know anything. Augustus is already the most advanced machine of the Consortium. Almost all of our best engineers and mechanics there have been transferred to develop Augustus. Moreover, we have not received any cooperation application for the mecha development project from the Institute. This machine has nothing to do with Consortium, Kaylan muttered in his heart, so it was independently developed by the equipment department of the Institute. But without the technical and resource support of the Consortium, could the depleted Research Institute really develop a machine stronger than Augustus in such a short period of time? Forget it, never mind, just sign for it first. If it's a pile of scrap metal that's delivered, then just throw it into the warehouse. With this idea in mind, Kaylan signed his name on the receipt. The camera on the top of the tablet detached itself from the fuselage and floated in front of Kaylan. A horizontal red laser shot out of the lens and scanned Kayan's face. The identity is confirmed and the goods have been signed for. After the second lieutenant finished reading the formulaic lines, he took out the communication equipment and said to the microphone, bring the things in, remember, take the number 3 transmission channel. Transmission channel No. 3, this time, not only Kaylan, but also the Hound was a little curious. In order to facilitate the entry and exit of personnel and supplies to the frontline supply base, Kaylan opened 4 semi-permanent transmission channels through the console connecting the inside and outside of Yagunactor. Channel 1 is a small channel for personnel to enter and exit. As for Channel 2 and number 3 is a large transmission channel specially used to transport large volume goods. Among them, the size of the transmission channel number 3 is more than twice that of the number 2, in order to save the energy of Yagunactor. Even during the construction process of the frontline base, there are only those that cannot be separated. Only large prefabricated modules will choose to go through the number 3 transmission channel, and other materials are basically transported in from the number 2 channel by manpower. Is he a big guy? Layton rubbed his hands with a look of enthusiasm on his face. Generally speaking, common 6-meter humanoid mechas and various vehicles can pass through the number 2 channel. Only goods with a height, length, or width exceeding 10 meters and a weight exceeding 450 kilograms are required. Using Channel 3. Could it be that the body the undead crew will send over, is a Gundam? But the problem is that Gundam thing, only makes sense in the worldview of Gundam. In the real world, it is just a flashy cool thing. Years of actual combat experience have proven that when a humanoid mecha, whether an autonomous robot or a manned vehicle, exceeds 8 meters in height, its practicality index will drop off a cliff. It is precisely for this reason that most humanoid mechas currently in service are essentially an enlarged version of power armor, rather than the mechanical giants that are more than 10 meters or even nearly 100 meters high that appear in carrot slices. Under the expectant gaze of everyone, a 15-meter tall gray metal container gradually appeared from the exit of the number 3 transmission channel. The container was densely covered with seals, and a security force equipped with heavy power armor stood guard next to the container. "It's really big." Layton moved forward excitedly, but was stopped by the guards. "No one is allowed to touch the container without the permission of the signer," a cold voice came from under the helmet of the power armor. Several soldiers behind even picked up the electromagnetic rifles in their hands and pointed the muzzles at Layton. "Don't worry." Kaylan walked up and patted Layton on the shoulder. Seeing Kaylan step forward, the guards who were at war with each other a second ago immediately put away their weapons and stepped aside. "By the way, I'm just here to unpack the express, is that okay?" Kaylan turned to look at the second lieutenant of the field corps and asked. "If the body inside is really something shady, maybe even using it has to be done secretly, right? But the problem is, Kaylan has no idea that there are any shady things now. Even the nuclear weapons and biological and chemical weapons in the old era that were restricted by various international conventions have already been put into actual combat. In the face of survival, where are there any taboos at all?" The people above didn't say anything," the second lieutenant said. "That should be enough." Kaylan reached out and tore off the seal attached to the electronic lock, and then put his palm on it. Along with a mechanical sound, the door of the container slowly rose upwards, and a chilly white mist escaped from the container. "Does something like a mecha need to be refrigerated for transportation?" However, when Kaylan saw clearly what was inside the container, his movements froze. It was a rusty metal mecha that looked like it was pieced together from discarded parts picked up from a junkyard. Although it was just kneeling quietly in the container, the machine exuded an extremely dangerous aura, as if it were a sleeping beast that would wake up at any time. The surface of the body is also embedded with dense blood vessel-like veins, in which the slowly flowing liquid exudes a faint red fluorescence. Its body structure is similar to that of humans. The trunk, limbs, joints, and even the texture of the muscles are all depicted, but it only lacks a head. Anyone who sees this mecha for the first time will involuntarily think of a mythical and legendary figure, Xin Tian. This was not the first time Kaylan saw this mecha. This one, the Blasphemer mecha. There is actually a blasphemer in the hands of the immortal crew. Where did they find this mecha? Is it in other Alpha civilization ruins? Kaylan walked around the machine, but he didn't feel that familiar feeling. He was basically certain that this blasphemer was not the one he abandoned in the abyss. But thinking about it, given the technological level of Alpha civilization, it shouldn't be difficult to mass-produce such weapons. Kaylan glanced at the manifest list posted on the inside of the container. The ARC, or rather, the Undead Crew Association, named this machine Fallen Angel Unit Number 1, Lucifer. This name is full of middle-class atmosphere. Without even thinking about it, it must have come from that guy Pan. But from a certain perspective, this translated name can be regarded as faithful, expressive and elegant. After all, the concept of angel does not exist in the language of the Alpha civilization. The name blasphemer is associated with betrayal. There seems to be nothing wrong with God's fallen angels being linked together. But if Kaylan was asked to name this machine, he would definitely call it Xin Tian. The heavy armor-piercing sword and plasma-charged cannon are the standard weapons of the blasphemer mecha. This Lucifer has both of them, but I don't know if there is an annihilation bomb inside the machine being used. If not, does the person piloting this mecha have the authority to use it? What is this? Layton's surprised voice came from behind. Kaylan turned around and saw that everyone else had gathered in front of the container. Countless surprised eyes focused on the renamed machine. Lucifer's Blasphemer Mecha. P.S. Thanks to H. Han Bao for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 649. This seems to be a creation of Alpha Civilization, Ghost Owl said. A mecha made by Alpha Civilization? Then, can humans drive it? Hound couldn't help but ask. I don't know. Ghost Owl shook his head. I have never heard that among the creations of Alpha Civilization, there is such a thing as a manned mecha. I'm quite curious, can humans sit in the cockpit of Alpha Civilization's mecha? Layton looked eager to try. By the way, Kaylan, is there an explanation text for this thing sent along with it? No. Kaylan shook his head and stretched out his hand to stroke the cold mecha surface. I don't know whether it is because the blasphemer is a mass-produced machine and needs to control costs, or for some other reason. This machine's the external armor is not made of nano-alloy, but a special material full of muscle. Although it is covered with rust, when the machine body moves, these hard metals will, just like the muscles and bones of living organisms, they make extremely natural movements. Just like the black mummy summoned by the sacrificial ritual. Rather than being a machine, it is more like a creature made entirely of metal. To be honest, I think this thing is like a statue. Look, the Hound suddenly raised his voice as if he had discovered a new world. What is hanging under this machine? Could it be that thing? Except for the fact that there is no head on the neck, this thing looks too much like a human. Even the parts are so complete. By the way, are their mechas divided into male and female ones? This one is male. If we find Ty's mother again, will the two mechas be able to give birth to a baby? Old dog, why are you so full of yellow waste? Even the mechas developed by ARC, there will be many machines with external radiators or firefighting equipment installed on the crotch of the machine. In my opinion, this thing is probably what may be external equipment. No, external equipment doesn't seem to have such a high degree of integration. Could it be that the rust all over the armor surface gave me this illusion? Layton tilted his head and circled around. The god walked round and round. Valentina, come here and give it a test drive. Kaylan waved to Valentina, who was standing behind the crowd. Even though he had personally piloted the blasphemer mecha once, he had to make the best use of it. To gain the greatest advantage, it must be operated by an ace pilot. What's more, if Kaylan serves as the pilot of this Lucifer, then he will not be able to borrow the power of the living armor. For their team, this is definitely a serious waste of combat power. After being called by Kaylan, Valentina silently walked up to the blasphemer mecha, looked up at the behemoth for half a minute, and then asked Kaylan, "Its pilot, where is the cabin?" "It should be right here." Kaylan pointed to the chest of the blasphemer. "How to open it?" Valentina asked again. "I can't find the cockpit opening device outside the fuselage." The things of Alpha Civilization, we probably can't think about it with our conventional thinking. Kaylan pretended to be stupid. "I think the pipes embedded in the gaps in the armor on the surface of the machine are very similar to the blood vessels of living organisms. Maybe, this thing needs blood to activate." He remembered that when he was in the bottomless sinkhole, the blasphemer mecha was activated after absorbing the flesh and blood of a creature called Experimental Subject No. 153, and Experimental Subject number 153 was in contact with during the fight. Kaylan gradually transformed into K-Ian's appearance. From a certain perspective, it can also be said that K-Ian's own flesh and blood activated the blasphemer. Of course, because of the big lizard, he would not tell anyone about his experience at the bottom of the bottomless sinkhole. All he could do now was to give Valian guidance in the general direction. Jingna tried it herself. Activated with blood, Hound couldn't help but ask in astonishment, if such a big guy were activated with blood, it wouldn't be enough to drain a living person dry, right? It's possible that only one drop of blood is enough. Yvonne shrugged. In Eastern fantasy novels, many magic weapons have a similar function of recognizing the owner with a drop of blood. Valentina didn't talk nonsense. She stretched the mechanical prosthetic leg in front of her, and a short sword with a blade of nearly 20 centimeters suddenly popped out from her wrist. Her other hand held it without hesitation. He touched the blade of the dagger and wiped it hard, and bright red blood gushed out from the palm of his hand. Then what? Valentina held the blood-stained blade tightly and turned to look at Kaylan. Try to touch the organism, with your blood. Valentina jumped lightly, and with the power of the prosthetic leg, she easily jumped to the arm of the blasphemer Mecha, and then used the arm as a springboard to jump to the top of the machine in one breath. She squatted down and pressed the wound on her palm against the machine body. People with sharp eyes can see that the blood flowing from the wound did not slide along the surface of the armor, but was absorbed by this strange metal. The liquid that was still flowing slowly in those pipes suddenly accelerated, and the liquid that was originally flowing slowly accelerated. The dim fluorescence emitted suddenly turned into bright scarlet. It's really activated, Layton muttered, looking up at the girl squatting on top of the machine. The next second, the blasphemer Mecha that was kneeling there suddenly trembled, and everyone subconsciously took a step back. Only Valentina and Kaylan did not move from their original positions. Valentina, come down, Kaylan shouted to the girl, it's ready. It's probably about to stand up. Be careful not to hit the top wall of the container. Oh, the girl responded, jumped off the machine, and rolled on the ground, still absorbing the impact of falling from a high place. Just like Kaylan activated the blasphemer last time, the machine that was originally kneeling stood up first, then took half a step forward, leaned down in a half-crouching posture, and stretched out an arm to Valentine. In front of N.A. The cockpit located on the chest and abdomen of the blasphemer was completely opened, but when they saw the scene in the cockpit, everyone's faces showed strange expressions. Why do I feel, this doesn't look like a cockpit, but rather like the bloody mouth of a monster? The Hound lowered his voice and said to Layton, especially the fleshy seat, you see it seems to be squirming, could this thing be the monster's tongue? I don't know. Layton was also a little dumbfounded. The original eagerness to try was no longer visible on his face. Maybe, it's probably a technology that combines biochemical technology with machinery. With the technological level of Alpha civilization, this makes sense. What's reasonable and unreasonable? Hound couldn't help but speak faster. I'm just going to ask you one thing, are you willing to sit in this mecha? Layton didn't speak, but shook his head quickly. No matter who it is, when they see such a cockpit for the first time, there will be some hesitation and resistance in their hearts, especially for a fanatic believer in the mechanicum like Layton. The blasphemer machine reveals a flesh and blood cockpit, which is equivalent to a Coca-Cola lover opening a can of Coca-Cola only to find that it is filled with Pepsi, or a sweet rice dumpling lover biting into it after taking a bite of the rice dumplings wrapped in white sugar. I found that the fillings in my mouth were braised pork and salted egg yolk. Isn't this a bull's head? No, it should be said to be a blasphemy against the supreme beauty of mechanical creations. Layton felt like his heart was breaking. Even if this machine is opened and contains a steam engine from the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, how could it be meat? I can't accept it. Layton shook his head and said to himself, now I can be sure, the Alpha people must be heretics and deserve to go to hell. But Valentina didn't care so much. She stepped on the lowered arms of the blasphemer Mecha, and then sat on the fleshy seat that was still squirming slightly. I don't see anything to manipulate. Valentina's words stopped abruptly in the middle of her words. Her slender body trembled violently like an electric shock, her head suddenly tilted upward, and her long neck suddenly became straight. Kaylan, who had once experienced the blasphemer's body, knew that the fleshy tentacles growing from the chair had penetrated Valentina's spine, completely connecting her consciousness to the body. But others did not know this. Seeing Valentina like this, the hound immediately jumped up and rushed towards the blasphemer. As he ran, he shouted, "Doctor, doctor, come here and save people. Damn, there's something wrong with this thing. If something happens to Ziona, how will I explain to Lao Chi when he comes out?" However, the hound failed to get close to the blasphemer. A huge mechanical arm lay in front of him, blocking his steps. At the same time, Valentina's somewhat dull voice sounded from the belly of the machine, "I fine." Huh, Kaylan looked at Valentina sitting in the cockpit. She didn't speak. It was obvious that this sentence was said by the blasphemer. Can this thing also convert the consciousness in the brain into audio and play it? Unfortunately, there was no one else around when he was driving, so he didn't notice such a function at all. You Ziona, hound was stunned, "What's going on? My consciousness seems to be connected to this machine." Valentina continued to speak with the machine, "It is like an extension of my limbs." The blasphemer's mechanical arm raised and drew out the heavy armor-piercing sword mounted on the back of the machine body. The machine's wrist turned, and the tip of the sword landed on the ground, trembling slightly. Everyone soon discovered that Valentina actually used the tip of her sword to write the name of this machine on the ground in 1 cm square font, "Fallen Angel Machine Number 1, Lucifer." In front of the huge sword body, this line of elegant small characters forms a sharp contrast. The operation precision required is even higher than using an ordinary carving knife to microcarve on a material the size of a grain of rice. For conventional mechas, if a computer program is used to control the movement of the robotic arm, it may be possible, but this blasphemer mecha doesn't even have an on-screen keyboard in the cockpit, let alone the kind of presets. Control program. I understand, it's the neural connection system. Leighton clapped his hands vigorously. The reason why there are no joysticks or buttons in the cockpit of this thing is because it is controlled by the driver's consciousness. This control method can reduce the operation delay to a level infinitely close to zero. For the operator, the moment he sits in the cockpit, the machine becomes his second body. "Didn't you say you can't accept it?" Hound couldn't help but roll his eyes at Leighton. "Why are you so excited now?" "Because the neural connection system is one of the most important development routes for the future mecha industry. As long as this technical difficulty can be overcome, even a person who has never been exposed to mechas or even doesn't know how to drive a car can achieve this goal." "The level of the current ace pilot," Leighton explained with spittle. "So exaggerated." The hound looked at Leighton, then at the fully open flesh cockpit of the blasphemer, and said, "But, you just said this was heresy. What's wrong? Now you have changed. Got an idea? Although I still can't accept this style of cockpit, I can learn from the technical aspects. Old dog, have you ever heard of bionics? Human beings have been inspired by technological progress in many kinds of creatures. It does not go against my original intention. For example, the neural connection system does not have to use living organisms, it can be replaced by metal electrodes." "Stop it, I'm not interested in hearing what you say, not to mention that I can't understand it." Hound waved his hand. "I only care about this big guy's combat effectiveness now. The mobility is more than 4 times that of Augustus. The weapons include the sword in his hand. The blade can be charged to activate a light blade similar to an energy shield, and there is also a plasma cannon." Valian Jingna said. Kaylan raised his eyebrows calmly. It seemed that this blasphemer's weapon list did not include annihilation bombs. He didn't know whether it was not equipped at the beginning or was dismantled later, or, yes, it has been used. Plasma cannon? Isn't that thing the main gun of a battleship? Hound couldn't help but open his mouth. This thing, if it is used in a tunnel, won't it also vaporize the surrounding teammates? It should be a small plasma cannon, Not as exaggerated as the one on the battleship, Layton said, but it is very difficult to miniaturize this thing. You know, the plasma cannon on the battleship is just the size of the cooling device is larger than the entire container. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 650. Valentina is still familiar with the operation of the blasphemer Mecha, while Kaylan has already made a list of those who participated in the infiltration operation, except for Valentina, Ziluo, and himself. The names of Akira Asano, Yvonne and Layton are also on this list. As for the Augustus that Valentina replaced, it was handed over to Layton to drive. But just when Kaylan was about to finalize the list, 33 suddenly stood up. "I'll go too," he said to Kaylan. "This operation is very dangerous. I can't guarantee that everyone can come back alive," Kaylan said. It was for this reason that he did not let the hounds and others go with him. Small teams are involved in infiltration operations, and soldiers are valuable but not expensive. Many, and Hound and the others are self-aware people, and they have no opinions because of this. This is a war, not an exploration of ruins. You see, although I am very worried about these bastards, I know that if I follow them, I will only be a burden to them, so I will neither force myself nor them. The Hound also looked at 33, "What's more, you are not a member of the Hunting God hunting group. There is absolutely no need for you to take this risk with us." "I've thought about it clearly. I want to join the God hunting group, so am I obligated to go with you?" 33 said calmly. "In addition, I feel that with my ability, I should not become a burden." Upon hearing that 33 was going to join the God hunting group, his companions suddenly looked surprised. The female military doctor even stepped forward anxiously to stop him, but he stopped him with his eyes. "I should have told you that the mission record of the Velociraptor team has been modified." 33 looked at Kaylan. "Yes, you said it." Kaylan nodded. "You were not surrounded by indigenous creatures. The real enemies you encountered were a group of monsters created by the Alpha civilization. But what I didn't tell you is, the people who drove those monsters were heretical sections." 33 continued. "So, you are doing it for revenge." The Hound's eyes changed slightly. "Then we can't let you go. People who participate in actions for revenge are prone to impulsiveness when their brains are hot. Can you guarantee that you are seeing? Can you stay sane when those damn guys are around?" "That's right, as the saying goes, it's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge." Layton immediately agreed. "Anyway, we have already come into conflict with the heretical sect, and there will be plenty of opportunities to seek revenge from them in the future. There is no need for you at all. I'm obsessed with this action. I'm sure I can maintain my sanity, otherwise, the ending of the Velociraptor team should be total annihilation." 33 said, "I have lived a comfortable life for too long, and this is a very rare opportunity. I am very worried about whether I will have such an opportunity in the future if your action fails." Ah, don't talk nonsense." The Hound spat on the ground several times. "We haven't set off yet, so I'm just saying that if the operation fails, it would be too unlucky." "Sorry." 33 bowed slightly to the Hound, "but my meaning has been made very clear. I want to participate in this operation." "Yes, you can join." Surprisingly, Kaylan did not refuse 33, "but you must strictly obey orders. Even if the culprit who caused the Velociraptor team to be almost wiped out is stationed in front of you, you are not allowed to touch a hair on it without my order." "Okay." 33 responded. "I want to go too." As soon as chapter 33 was finished, the female military doctor immediately rushed forward and said to Kaylan, "Take me with you. The medical license I hold is Class B, if I remember correctly. The doctor in your team has a C-level license. In addition, I have 6 years of practical experience in the field corps." I am proficient in field first aid and can complete multiple surgical operations under various extreme conditions. If the team candidates are decided based on their own skill level, I think I should be qualified. Shut up, the female military doctor was halfway through her words when 33 interrupted her with an indifferent expression. Why? It's decided that you stay here with the others. If you don't obey this decision, don't team up with me in the future, 33 said, but before you quit the team, you must listen to me. Of you. Actually, Ivan's level should be more than sea level, but he hasn't had time to take the higher level license test during this period. Kaylan looked at the two of them helplessly, and said, it's a bad thing to say, I think you are more emotional than 33, so I can't take you to participate in the operation. After nearly a few twists and turns, the candidates for the team to participate in the operation were finally decided. At the same time, the main force of the ground troops of the Field Corps had been assembled on the north side of the White Ridge Mountains and were ready to launch an attack on the ruins of the ancient Bronze City at any time. According to the secret message sent from the Field Corps, they will launch a feint attack on the ruins of the ancient Bronze City in 6 hours to cover the infiltration of Ian's team. However, in order to control casualties, the intensity of the feint attack will not be very strong and the duration will only be 4 hours. Kaylan and the others must open the last 11 kilometers of tunnels and enter the ruins of the ancient Bronze City in 4 hours. If this mission goal is achieved, the feint attack will immediately transform into a real all-out attack. The main force will continue to put pressure on the heretical sect defending the city on the frontal battlefield, trying to buy time for Kaylan and the others to seize control of the ruins. It is no exaggeration to say that every second that the main force on the frontal battlefield fought for Kaylan and the others was filled with a large number of lives. This style of play is similar to stud, whether it's the Field Corps or Kaylan and the others, they only have one chance. If this operation fails, it will be difficult to conquer the ruins of the ancient Bronze City in the future. Of course, this does not mean that the success rate of this operation is high. According to the calculations of the Field Corps Staff Department, even if Kaylan and the others sneak into the ruins of the ancient Bronze City on time, the chance of seizing control of the ruins is less than 30%. The first difficulty before them was how to eliminate the enemies in the tunnel and get through the remaining 11 kilometers within 4 hours. According to the original digging speed of the Gopher team, it would take at least a day and a night to dig these 11 kilometers, even if the Kaylan team has bug-level equipment like Blasphemer and bug-level characters like Ze Luo, it will take 20. The 4-hour project was compressed into less than 4 hours, which still seemed a bit reluctant. But this does not mean that this is an impossible task at all. Since the Gopher team and subsequent reinforcements were attacked in the tunnel, it means that there is another entrance and exit in the tunnel, and the people or monsters who attack them, it's through this entrance and exit. And this entrance and exit is most likely inside the ruins of the ancient Bronze City. Even if it is not within the ruins, it should be in the same direction of the ruins. If they want to reach their destination on time, their only option is to borrow. The high-speed transport ship Kaylan and the others boarded stopped over a mine 25 kilometers north of the White Ridge Mountains. On the outskirts of the mine, a temporary military base has been established with about 2,000 soldiers from the Field Corps guarding this base that was just built less than an hour ago. Their mission is to prevent the heretical sect from emerging from the tunnel dug by the Gopher team and sneaking into the rear flank of the main force. This mine was discovered in the early days of Ark's landing on planet Alpha. It was rich in aluminum ores and some associated minerals. At that time, Ark, which was in urgent need of resources, immediately sent a group of engineers to develop the mine, but before it could be put into production, people discovered that this mine, although the mine is rich in reserves, the ore contains a lot of impurities and is difficult to smelt. In layman's terms, it means there is a lot of ore, but the quality is very poor. As several other aluminum deposits of better quality were discovered, the mine was abandoned by Ark, leaving only a few unfinished shafts. The excavation point of the Gopher team is the end of the main tunnel of well number 4, This tunnel points almost straight to the ruins of the ancient copper city located northwest of the mine. From this starting point, it can save at least 5 kilometers of digging. At this moment, due to the loss of contact between the Gopher team and the follow-up reinforcements, the wellhead of well number 4 has been heavily surrounded by the field army. 4 fortress-like mammoth tanks formed a circle 50 meters away from the wellhead. Circle, various heavy weapons relied on these 4 tanks to set up a tight fire blockade. Kaylan, who had just stepped off the suspended platform, noticed that the materials piled behind this blockade, except for those in addition to conventional ammunition boxes made of plastic steel, refrigerated storage boxes with white buffer shells, self-contained power supplies and password locks can be seen everywhere. These refrigerated storage boxes contain active ammunition specifically targeted at seeds of corrosion. According to military standards, a 1 meter square refrigerated storage box should contain 4,000 rounds of general-purpose rifle ammunition or 6,000 rounds of pistol ammunition. And wherever Kaylan could see, he saw at least 50 refrigerated storage boxes. In order to fight this battle, the immortal crew may have invested all the wealth they have saved for several years. Although 1 round of active ammunition only requires 1 unit of flesh-eating worm cells, and a mature flesh-eating worm can produce at least tens of thousands of active ammunition, every time a mature flesh-eating worm is cultivated, a living person must be consumed. Feed. If the active ammunition ration of the frontal troops is so abundant, then the feed consumption of producing this batch of active ammunition is at least several thousand people. All the death row inmates on the Ark in recent years are probably not even close to this number. Kaylan once used the highest authority of the Security Bureau to access information related to the production of active ammunition. The Institute has long tried to use cloned organs and tissues of animals or humans to cultivate flesh-eating worms, but the experiments failed without exception. Even human corpses that have been preserved in cold storage and whose body tissues have not yet become necrotic cannot allow the eggs of flesh-eating worms to hatch successfully. Only living people, and those in good physical condition, can successfully hatch these eggs and allow them to parasitize in the body. In this case, people naturally become a resource that can be used to produce ammunition. Kaylan didn't want to think too much about the origin of these active ammunition, being used as feed for flesh-eating worms. Even for death row prisoners, it is an unbearable torture. What's more, using all death row prisoners as feed, the output there are still huge gaps. There is no doubt that the production method of active ammunition is extremely inhumane, but if this is not done, more people will only die fighting against the corrosion seed. In addition to the active cells of flesh-eating worms, the stalagmites that Kaylan found in the Nameless Island cave can also restrain the seeds of erosion. However, compared to the seeds of erosion, the difficulty of obtaining stalagmites is more than 1 level higher. If the shadow that looked like Liao Xing hadn't pushed Kaylan into the abyss, he wouldn't have known how he could have returned to the Pioneer. If there is a chance in the future, Kaylan will definitely go to explore that unnamed island, but now is not the time to consider such a thing. The troops stationed at the wellhead had already made way for the passage, and they watched Kaylan and others silently. From their eyes, Kaylan could clearly see a hint of sympathy. These ordinary soldiers obviously did not know the identity of their own team. Perhaps in their view, their team, like the 2 groups of people who disappeared before, were just there to kill people. Of course, the essence of this task is indeed no different from giving away someone's head. By the way, does this scene seem familiar to you? Augustus's cockpit was open, and Leighton, who was sitting inside, said while looking around. What's the feeling of déjà vu? Have you been to this place before? 33 turned to look at Leighton and asked a little strangely. I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about a mission we took over before. Leighton shrugged, but now the person who issued the mission has almost become our leader's wife. You mean the time with Leviathan? Yvonne answered, it's different, it gives me a completely different feeling. Why? It's obviously very similar. Leighton said again, I remember that at that time, The Soma Consortium also used 4 tanks to block the entrance to the mine, but they used Hammer-class siege tanks, which were smaller than the Mammoth. It's better to grow a behemoth smaller. No. In my eyes, Leviathan is a living thing, no matter whether it is dead or alive. At that time Ivan shook his head. The mines on Leviathan's body are actually its blood vessels and body fluid channels. In my eyes, it is completely different from the manually dug tunnels. Ivan paused and continued, it's like in the eyes of an old dog, you are just a big guy with a brain full of motor oil, but in my eyes, there are fat, blood vessels and muscles under the skin of your head, and below that it's the skull. Do you doctors see people this way? Leighton instantly felt his scalp was a little chilly, and couldn't help but reach out and touch it twice. That's me anyway, Ivan replied casually, then turned to look at Kaylan. It's almost time to send it out. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 651. 80 kilometers north of the White Ridge Mountains, the Field Corps Assembly Point. All the forces of the 14 divisions have been assembled in just a few hours. In order to transport these troops, almost all the airships and transport aircraft of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd cruise fleets were mobilized. Even the Zero Fleet, some of the long-distance transport aircraft were temporarily mobilized. Even so, there is still a big gap in the Air Force's transportation capacity. Even if every airship and every transport plane is filled with people, it can only meet less than 1/3 of the transportation volume. Soldiers are very fast. If the remaining troops are allowed to go to the assembly point by land, it will take at least a week for all the troops to be assembled, 186 hours. There are too many variables that can happen during this time. The longer the delay is, the more fully prepared the heretical sects in the ancient Copper City ruins will be, and the greater the casualties in the siege will be. From the beginning, this was not a battle of equal strength. Only by taking things by surprise could Ark gain some chance of winning. After discovering that air transport alone could not complete the mission on time, the Field Corps headquarters even came up with a somewhat crazy solution. They directly stuffed the soldiers into large containers, and then hung the containers under the transport aircraft. Transporting people to the assembly point like transporting goods. The cost of this was that during the transportation process, 2 severely overloaded transport planes lost control and collided. A total of more than 600 people on board the 2 planes and in the hanging containers were killed. In addition, a transport aircraft formation was attacked by indigenous creatures, snake-headed vultures, while passing through a dangerous airspace. Although the escorting fighter jets quickly shot and killed these snake-headed vultures, there was still one snake-headed vulture. When he was about to die, he broke the sling under a transport plane. The container fell directly from an altitude of thousands of meters without any protection measures and buffering devices. You can imagine what the fate of the people inside was like. Before the battle officially started, the Field Corps had already lost nearly 1,000 soldiers. There is nothing we can do about this. In the temporary command headquarters in the sky, an old man with the rank of lieutenant general on his shoulders sighed and said to his colleagues around him, "After the attack starts, there will be hundreds of casualties every minute. Compared with this loss is nothing." Another man, who also holds the rank of lieutenant general but looks to be less than 40 years old, the man answered, "As the saying goes, kindness does not control the army. It is indeed a good thing for young people to be energetic, but when you reach my age, you will know." The lieutenant general who spoke at the beginning said again. His temples are completely gray, and the deep crow's feet are piled up at the corners of his eyes. Dark brown age spots can be seen everywhere on his face that has been tempered by time. A large cloak-style general's trench coat is draped on his somewhat stooped torso. It looked a little empty when I went up there. What do you know? The young lieutenant general turned his head, with a trace of doubt in his eyebrows. When you lie in bed late at night and close your eyes to fall asleep, the souls of those soldiers who were sent to the battlefield by your own hands will appear in front of your eyes. A general will be the one who decides their fate. Naturally, You also need to bear their obsession and resentment. The old lieutenant general sighed. These dead souls will haunt you for a lifetime until your body turns to ashes in the incinerator. The dead souls are just superstition, the young lieutenant general said with some disdain. What's more, I rarely dream, and I almost never have nightmares. That's why I envy you young people. To be honest, I voted against this combat operation, not only me, but also most of the decision makers in the Joint Parliamentary Group are against this operation. Less than half of the young military officers and the most radical group of hawks voted in favor. If it weren't for the people above insisting on fighting, this resolution would never have been passed. In fact, we all our voting is just a formality to express our opinions, it has no actual meaning. The old lieutenant general was silent for a moment, and then continued, in our opinion, this battle is no different from the betting on the fate of the country in the old era. We have bet almost all our chips, so we cannot afford to lose. But if heretical sects are allowed to occupy the ruins of Alpha civilization one after another, it will just be a slow death, the young lieutenant general retorted immediately. In my opinion, heretical sects are like gangrene in the bones. If we can't discover them, we must eradicate it as soon as possible, but when the disease reaches its terminal stage, there is really no cure. Then do you know why ARC has not taken any large-scale military action against the heretical sect for decades? The so-called heretical sect was just a small organization with less than 100 members at the beginning. Even their prophets inheriting some of the legacy of Alpha civilization, even if the seeds of corrosion have combat power that far exceeds that of ordinary creatures, in the face of the absolute power of the ARC, they are just a group of little bugs that can be crushed to death at any time, the old lieutenant general said. Have you ever wondered why the people above didn't choose to crush them to death at that time? Is it because they are so good at hiding like insects? The doubt in the young lieutenant general's eyes became more and more serious. No, it's just because the people above deliberately let them go, the old lieutenant general shook his head. You just described the heretical sect as a gangrene attached to the bones. Then you should also know that malignant tumors in cancer patients are not it's not a foreign invader, but one's own cells that have lost control due to mutation, right? The young lieutenant general couldn't help but hold his breath, his eyes widened slightly, and he stared in surprise at this colleague who was almost twice his age. In the early years, the Institute once proposed a project. I don't know if you have heard of it, the veteran lieutenant general continued. Some researchers believe that if the proliferation rate of cancer cells can be successfully controlled, this will make immortality a reality. Possibility: human lifespan is limited to the number of divisions of its own cells, while cancer cells can divide almost unlimited times, and can transform and metastasize at will. The researcher believes that cancer cells may be the direction of human evolution in the future, but in this direction something went awry, and the changes that were supposed to bring immortality to humans actually led to their death. Although what the old lieutenant general said seemed to have nothing to do with what the two people had discussed previously, the expression on the young lieutenant general's face changed from confusion to surprise, and then from surprise to astonishment as he got closer. He stayed there for a while, then asked with some difficulty, so, the exile policy in the early years was also because of... Okay, the old lieutenant general interrupted his question. There are some things that you just need to have a rough idea of in your mind. You don't need to say them clearly. Okay, the young lieutenant general took a few steps back in a daze, reaching out to hold the back of the chair. When he looked down at the dozens of phalanxes that were undergoing the last preparations before the war, there was an obvious change in his eyes. At this moment, a staff officer opened the hatch and walked in, speaking quickly to report to the two of them. Report to the commander. The infiltration team has arrived at the mining base. The old lieutenant general raised his head and glanced at the countdown on the screen. There were still 16 minutes left before launching the attack. Got it, he nodded to the staff officer. Let the troops below get ready. We will launch an attack on the target on time. The staff officer saluted and quickly retreated. There were only two of them left in the command room. Next, "It's your stage." The old lieutenant general glanced at the young lieutenant general with an extremely complicated expression. "Lieutenant General Terrans." Terrans Linda, the youngest graduate of the ARC First Military Academy since its establishment. At the age of only 19, he obtained the diploma from the First Military Academy with full marks in the written examination and 16 consecutive wins in the simulation sandbox. At that time, he was hailed as a rising future star. After graduation, Terrans lived up to expectations. As soon as he joined the Field Corps, he commanded several beautiful small-scale battles as a regimental commander. Within half a year, he was promoted to the position of Staff Officer of the General Headquarters of the Field Corps, and then his military rank and position climbed at a rocket-like speed, and he was awarded the rank of Brigadier General at the age of 29, except for those school-level officers who were posthumously awarded the rank of General because of their sacrifices. He was the first person to arrive at the ARC landing on planet Alpha. At his current position, he is the only person who obtained the title of General before the age of 30. He has a terrifying battlefield sense and ability to analyze and judge, and his command style is known for his boldness and decisiveness, but he also has a surgical precision in handling some details. Someone reviewed the battles he commanded and found that at the critical stages of those battles, his calculations of the battle situation were even accurate to squad-level units. It was like playing chess. One soldier, one pawn operations are all very important. The most shocking thing is that Terrans never needs a staff team when he is commanding. He is like an independent thinking chess player, analyzing tens of millions of real-time messages and moves by himself. Control the entire battle situation. The staff will interfere with my thinking. This is what Terrans said when faced with other people's questions. Of course, this kind of command method is also very terrible for the commander himself. It is almost commonplace to command the battlefield while breathing oxygen. When the orderlies clean the command room afterwards, they can often find many empty ones on the ground. Stimulant syringe. But it is undeniable that Terrans has innate talents and abilities. In a battle commanded by him, even if it is a losing battle, he can control his own losses to a minimum. There are still 9 minutes. Terrans glanced at the countdown. Let the gunboats of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd cruise fleets move forward to the preset coordinates A6, and their firepower covers the area from A19 to C2. The area from A19 to C2 that Terrans mentioned was the wasteland area between the ruins of the ancient Bronze City and the assembly point of the field army. Although this area seemed to be flat and could not hide any traps, out of caution, he decided to carpet bomb an area. He does not have the arrogance inherent in most geniuses. On the contrary, he is a very cautious person. Prudence has never been a trait that conflicts with boldness and decisiveness. When they coexist in the same person, the effect they exert is far greater than 1 + 1 = 2. After the bombing, the mechas and tanks of the 9th and 10th Armored Divisions moved to the B-15 position, and the infantry was on standby. The 115th Squadron of the 2nd Cruise Fleet tried to airdrop an unmanned aerial vehicle target drone above the ruins of the ancient Bronze City to test the opponent's reaction. The 20th and 27th Infantry Divisions followed the preset route to outflank the target on the left and right sides, and began to build temporary fortifications after arriving at the predetermined location. One order after another was issued by Terrans, and the assembly phalanx below began to move. Hundreds of tanks and mechas broke away from the phalanx and formed an arrow-shaped advancement formation directly in front of the large army. As soon as the armored forces were integrated, a dark shadow came over them. They were the gunboat troops who were ordered to press forward. Not long after, deafening shelling sounded above the heads of the ground troops, and the plain area directly ahead was covered by dense explosions. Reporting to Commander, the first round of fire coverage strikes has ended. According to computer analysis, the enemy has planted about 2,000 old anti-infantry mines in the plains, and they have been completely destroyed, the staff officer said on the other side of the screen. As old subordinates who have worked under Terrans for several years, These staff officers also know that their responsibilities only need to report the battle situation and computer analysis results to the general. As for how to judge the war situation, what measures need to be taken, and what orders need to be issued, it is entirely up to Terrans alone. The staff team didn't even need to give suggestions, even they themselves often complained about themselves in private. 30 bad generals can't stand up to one Zhujiang. It can be said that the staff group under Terrans is probably the one with the smallest workload in ARC. There are only 2,000 old anti-infantry mines. 2,000 landmines may sound like a lot, but they are actually very sparsely distributed in such a large area. If they were evenly distributed, each landmine could even be thousands of meters apart. Even if this round of strikes is not carried out, these mines will hardly cause any substantial damage to the armored troops that subsequently enter the battlefield. As for the infantry, by the time they enter this area, the mines have already been triggered by the armored troops. 88. Exchanging a round of carpet bombing for 2,000 old-fashioned anti-infantry mines is not a very cost-effective deal. The cost of one round of 200 mm caliber heavy howitzer shells alone is equivalent to hundreds of such mines, and one round at least thousands of such shells were fired during the round bombing. However, Terrans did not show a relaxed look on his face, but issued another order: add 2 more rounds of fire coverage, and use ground-penetrating bombs. After the third round of bombing, the armored forces entering the scene. The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fighter formations are responsible for air support. What's wrong? Do you think there's something wrong with this plane? The old lieutenant general turned his head and glanced at Terrans. Since the heretic sect can lay 2,000 landmines without us noticing at all, then I have every reason to believe that there are more things hidden under the ground on this plane, Terrans said decisively. These landmines are not used to reduce our effective forces, but to make us relax our vigilance.